Good evening. This is Father Joseph Swaden, and as you'll notice, there are two people on the other side, and so we are going to get introduced. Benedicite.
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 Okay, well, we all know Bishop Enoch and Bishop Lazr. This is your first time on, so please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bishop Lazer. I am the Vicar Bishop of Niagara in Canada. I reside at the elevation of the Triumphant Cross Monastery, a small mission monastery in the Niagara region of Canada. I was elevated with Bishop Enoch in 2019, and we are
Western Rite.
Yes, we are Western Rite, and we're struggling to missionize or evangelize. And let me see, what else can I say? I am of Carpatho-Russian heritage, and though I was not raised Orthodox, I was exposed to Orthodoxy at an early age through mostly my mother's side of the family, because we're from Eastern Europe, and so my mother was baptized Orthodox. She became Catholic when she married my father, and so I pursued a career in first Eastern Orthodoxy. I was a uniate priest for many years. Well, not many years, actually, just two and a half, something like that. So, but I was always interested in Orthodoxy, and I eventually left the parish in Toronto, and I went down to actually first a small monastery on Long Island, and then not long after that, I ended up at Jordanville. So I was tonsured into the Jordanville Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of St. Joe Pachayev. And then,
what year was that in?
Sorry?
What year was that in?
I was ordained uniate priest in 1984, and so I was down in Jordanville by 86.
Okay,
Yeah.
so by 86 you're Orthodox. Okay.
Oh yes, I was Orthodox, and I was kind of floating around, and for that summer.
Tonsured around 90.
And I was tonsured Stavro for a monk around 1990 during Great Lent, and I was many things at Jordanville. Some people might remember that I was guest master for several years. I also became the choir master, the second choir master, conducting a lot of the big services. I was gardener, vestment keeper, sort of a lot of things all rolled into one. It was a lot of work, but I decided that the spiritual direction of the monastery was not up to snuff. And I decided to ask for a blessing to leave, to go abroad and take up a teaching career to make money to start something in Canada. And it was during that time that my colleague and I discovered the Metropolitan. So we were there. I was there 16 years teaching English in Korea. And I came back in 2014, and then I almost immediately contacted Vladika Metropolitan John, explained who I was, where I was coming from. He wrote me a very gracious reply, and eventually I came down to the Abbey, and I was received into the Metropolitan. And when was that now? That's 8 years now, 9 years ago? Yeah. So one thing led to another. I came down again in 2016, was made hieromonk, and then obviously the elevation in 2019. So that's basically my background.
Well, Bishop Lazer has a number of interesting Jordanville stories if you ever want to get involved in those.
I sure do, yes. Yeah. So
but you can't tell them in public.
Oh, well.
Well,
nothing's really bad.
No. So, yes, but yes.
Like the uniates who showed up at Jordanville. That's always a funny story.
Yes, it is, yes. Anyway, but...
okay.
Yeah, so... so of course I knew the old Russian fathers intimately at Jordanville. I never learned Russian fluently. Of course, I knew Slavonic pretty well because I had to conduct all the services in Slavonic. In those days, it was all Slavonic. There was very little English. There was resistance to introducing English. I was sort of a trailblazer in that regard, along with Father Lawrence. But yeah, they very much resisted English. Of course, back then, being in touch with the Catacomb Church, Jordanville had a purpose. And of course, the purpose was to, bring Orthodoxy back into Russia into the catacomb church. The whole idea, the whole concept of the printing press, and everything was geared towards that. And even in my time there, I left, by the way, so for the record, for all the listeners, I left with a blessing. Rumors were spread later that I had run away. Absolutely not true. I have documentation that I left with a blessing. And, because I know things that, start up. And even Political Loris was concerned. He said, "Where will you go? What will you do?" I said, "Please don't worry about me. Thank you." And so, And I did I tried to contact the ROKOR Korean mission when I was there, but the priest had just moved. He was very isolated, and it just never worked out. I was friends with who later became Metropolitan Hilarion. We spent a lot of time together. He would visit my cells in Jordanville. We had a lot of good conversations. And it was actually him I asked in the early 2000s. I said, "You know what, Medica, I'm not sure if I really want to stay in the ROKOR anymore. I'm looking for something else." And he, again, wrote a very gracious letter. And he said, "I bless you to join whatever jurisdiction you will be happy in," or something like that.
Or go to Australia.
Okay, or go to Australia, yeah. So I also have interesting stories about the famous Metropolitan Vitali. But yeah. And okay, I don't want to talk anymore. That's enough for me. So yes, and actually it was my colleague sitting here, Benedict Barnabas, who introduced me to the Metropolia through your book, Father Joseph. What was it called?
Which one?
The history of the
history.
Oh, okay, Lux Veritatis. Okay.
Yes, that's what Lux. Yes, Lux Veritatis. Yeah. So and so I read it and I thought, this sounds like what I'm looking for. This is serious. This is they take the faith seriously, patristically, a continuation of the Holy Apostles. And this is what I was looking for. Because even in Jordanville, even though I left in 97, a whole 10 years before the rapprochement, there were rumblings. And okay, here's an interesting story about Political Loris. Now, Political Loris would sometimes have these long absences. And I would ask, "Where is Political Loris?" And they said, "Oh, he's in Slovakia visiting relatives." Well, we all know now that actually he may have gone to Slovakia to visit his relatives, but he spent a lot of time in Russia, traveling around, making connections. And what's that?
I said, "Wow."
So he was already doing that. And of course, they were not revealing it. And so already there were rumblings of, and there, of course, you had your very pro-Moscow Patriarchate priests in ROKOR. And of course, being guest master, I had met all of these people and constantly giving rooms to clergy and, other pilgrims and whatnot.
But there were also catacomb priests coming to Jordanville.
There were also catacomb priests. And actually, I have a really interesting story about the now Metropolitan Onufrius in Ukraine.
You did the Moscow Patriarchate.
Moscow Patriarch, yes.
Yeah.
He actually, through a friend of ours, came to Jordanville in around, 1995 as a Moscow Patriarchate bishop. And my friend brought him, and my friend said to him, "You have to meet this man. He's Carpatho-Russian." I said, "Oh." I said, "Okay." So I, as guest master, said, "Okay, we have a visiting bishop. He needs a room." So I said, "Okay, I will get a room." Of course, that created such a flutter of concern. And people found out right away, "He's not with us. He's not with us. He's with Moscow." And I said, "I'm the guest master. It is Christian charity to give this man a room, and I'm giving him a room. Not only am I giving him a room, I am taking him down to the trapeza and making him tea and giving him something to eat." So I asked the cellular, I said, "Please open the storerooms. I want to make tea for this man." And then I went to Bishop Loris and I said, "I think there's someone here you should talk to."
He probably knew him.
Ironically, he probably
did. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So, but he pretended he didn't, so. Of course, now that was many years ago, and really sad what's going on there right now. Just deplorable, their situation, and So yes,
But
yes.
people were genuinely startled when they discovered what had been going on behind the scenes.
This is Benedict. This is
Yes,
Barnabas.
yes.
Barnabas.
Oh, yeah. There's also
Barnabas.
been you're like a, I guess like a
He's a late. He's a late for. You're a. What is he? Late first.
Layman. Yeah.
He's a layman. Yes.
Yeah.
A renegade Ukrainian Catholic.
Who became
So-
Orthodox.
Yeah. So okay, and
But I've posted on NFTU over the years.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I don't remember everybody immediately.
No, of course you wouldn't.
yeah, of course not. Yes, yes. So Father Joseph, you also had a connection with Ukrainian Catholics at one point, correct?
Yeah, well, it was the Ruthenian Catholics, but I did actually. I mean, before I was Orthodox, I would for about 2 years I was going to Ruthenian and Ukrainian churches.
Oh, okay, okay,
Hmm.
yeah, right, yeah.
In what part of the world?
In the U.S., in Florida and in New York.
Okay.
And so
All over there.
yeah. Once I discovered like the Ukrainian Basilian Fathers in New York, they were actually on the church calendar. So nothing made sense when I became Orthodox or on the process of learning about Orthodoxy. Even when I'd see things like the new calendar and like an OCA church, I'm like, what is this? It's two calendars mixed into one. It doesn't make
Right.
sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So
So do we have any questions so far, or any topics?
No, there were a few comments. I put them all on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Sava asked for Bishop Lazer's blessing. Then remember him in your prayers. Let me see here. South Padre Tony wants to hear more stories. We've already got 2, but we're always welcome for more.
okay.
Union story about the
Yes.
Anti-Doran.
Yeah, okay. So okay, here's one for you.
Before we go on, I just want to explain this because South Padre Tony had a very good question. For those who don't know, Enoch, if you want to give the background to why there's so many people in the room right now.
Oh, our church had a synod meeting on Saturday, so Bishop Lazer drove down with layman Benedict, Bishop Lazer for the synod meeting. So that's why.
So the synod meeting of our Metropolitan.
Yes, on Saturday. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes, it was a really good chance because of the pandemic we
couldn't cross the border.
We could not cross the border, so we were really concerned about that, and we didn't really have anything online. So we were very fortunate to have Bishop James in Scotland join us via Skype, and so there were 4 of us having a meeting, and so we discussed many things that needed to be discussed, and we made some resolutions. So yes, and so we drove down on Friday. It was a bit arduous because I think I got lost. My GPS was not working, so I was panicking. And so, but with glory to God, we made it in the dark. And so, but yes, and we did veer off at Jordanville, sort of in the town beneath the monastery, just for old time's sake and to have lunch. So, but we didn't want to go any further up the mountain. So,
and their favorite restaurant had been demolished.
Yes, it was not there anymore. Yeah. So, okay, a bit of a slight background. My mother's family. Well, my father's family is actually Carpatho-Russian, but they went down to Croatia in the 1750s, and so they're basically call themselves Croatians now. But our surname is Carpathian, and my mother's family is from Eastern Slovakia, and it is 6 villages over from where Lazer is, which was where the original St. Joseph Bachai Brotherhood is from, and where Bishop Loris was from, and the Brotherhood there. So. With that in mind, in Toronto, I was pretty much by myself. Of course, Ukrainian Catholics, when they realized I was so-called high church uniate, sort of befriended me. And it was they who, of course, they knew I was interested in Orthodoxy. They brought me down to the States. I first went to New Skeet. And when I entered New Skeet, and I thought, if this is Orthodoxy, I'm staying where I am. It
has that effect on people.
Yes, exactly. So we then went to Jordanville, and when I walked into the Cathedral of Jordanville, I said, this is it. this is more like it. This is, this is what I'm interested in. So, however, so I ended up I ended up moving down there, and these uniates these Ukrainian Catholics, they were high church. Now they would come to Jordanville once a year.
And what does it mean to say high church for Ukrainian Catholics?
Means less Latinized. Okay, so high church would be like 3 barred crosses as opposed to just the Latin cross.
No.
Okay, high church, full iconostas, as opposed to like
attempting.
So, those like kind of wire setups.
Yeah, that's that sort of thing. Yeah, so even daring to get away with things like high back vestments, like Russian style vestments and Russian stuff. So
Kievan too.
Yeah, Kievan too, of course. Yeah. So these Eastern Rite Catholic clergy and laymen would continue to come down once a year, pretty much to imitate what they did at Jordanville, strangely, and to bring it back to Canada and say, this is our tradition, so we should do this, we should do that. Woven into their, of course, Ukrainian cultural experience, their Galician cultural experience, Western Ukraine, okay? So they would come down and they would see me at that point. So let's go, okay, so the story is, at that point, I was many things. I was in the garden, my hands were covered in mud, I was in my dirty apron, kneeling on the ground, and they came by and they kind of looked at me and said, ha, 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 here you are in the mud like a peasant, so you could have been so great if you stayed where you were in the Holy Catholic Church. So I thought, okay, that was not very nice, but I let it go. And at that point, I said, now, Father, to the fathers, you come down here every year to learn about Orthodoxy. Don't you think it's time to actually become Orthodox? And so they said, they right away said, no, we're going to bloom where we are planted, which is a lyric from a kind of pop charismatic Roman Catholic song that was, they did in the seminaries way back then. So I thought, okay, stay where you are, stay in heresy, whatever, that's your choice. So then they came with their riazas and their skufias and their 3 barred crosses, standing in the church for the service. And then, I don't know why, for some reason, I was not in the choir, but I was in the main body of the church, the sanctuary. And so they decided that they were going to go up for Antediron. And that's when I thought, no. Only Orthodox Christians are allowed to receive Antediron, but they thought that they could get away with it. So as Bishop Loris came out, he descended the ambo, and the deacon was standing beside him. The uniates went up. I swooped in like a bat, and I went up to the deacon, and I said, please do not give these people Antediron. They are not Orthodox. They are not deserving. They are, pretending. So at that point, Archbishop Loris was confused, and the deacon shouted at me and said, get out of the way, So, of course, the Ukrainian Catholics heard that, and their tails went in between their legs. They were horrified that I did that. They left the church. But I was not satisfied with that. And so afterwards, I went to Bishop, after the trapeza, I went to Bishop Loris's office, and I said, excuse me, Vladika, I need to talk to you. And he says, what about? And why is someone peeling the potatoes? And so, so I said, no, this is not about potatoes. This is about your deacon shouting at me, saying to get out of the way. And I said, I want to tell you something. Those people are the descendants of the people that went into my mother's village, that went into your village and forced our people to become uniate. Those are the people, not those specific people, but you know what I mean, historically, And so I said, we cannot allow them to pretend. So what are they going to do? They're going to, oh yes, we go to Jordanville, we receive Antediron, we're just like them. No. So I put a stop to it. So I said, your deacon needs to apologize to me, that he, and so
bad chance.
Yeah, bad chance. So basically it just, but I expressed myself, and I said, I am no secret uniate. I did not invite them here. And, We have to take responsibility to, in a way, it's just a token, but to preserve the faith. And part of the preserving the faith is to, not give heretics the impression that they are part of us. Right. Okay. So that was that story. And so
people have been asking for more stories.
So Jordanville, do they no longer give Antediluvian to non-Orthodox, or?
Well,
I don't think the Galazers ever showed up again.
No. So they stayed away for 2 years, and they showed up again like 2 years from there, and they were kind of very timid. And they said, the father wants to speak with you. I said, yeah, no problem. I don't care. You can talk to me, And so they never tried. The point is, they never tried that again, So I said, they needed to be put in their place, and the sacramentals and blessings of the Orthodox Church are for Orthodox Christians. Okay. Now, of course, we all know what happened in 2007. So now, what is it? Roman Catholic sacraments are valid, and all that.
According to the Moscow Patriarchate. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, maybe they have the Havana Declaration, where essentially Patriarch Kirill says that Pope Francis is a brother in Christ. Mm-hmm. And
the whole thing about sister churches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not to mention, like the Antiochian Patriarchate has a limited communion agreement with Monophysites.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's supposed. I'm hearing that supposedly there have been Monophysites who say that they canceled that last year, but I don't have any proof of it.
Say that again, Father Joseph. I'm sorry.
Well, lately, I've noticed that there have been Monophysites on Twitter, who have, had reached out to me and had said, no, I said, I don't understand your logic, because they're like, well, because they wanted to argue against the World Orthodox. And I explained to them, I said, how can you argue with them if you're in the same exact position as they are? Because if they're in communion with you, in limited intercommunion with you, and then you are with them, then you recognize each other as one church. So how would I be able to team up with you against them when you believe the same things they do? And they're like, no, we don't have those agreements anymore. And so allegedly, Subdeacon Daniel Kakish, he wrote me and he said, no, there's nothing on paper. It's just something. And I said, is this from the Middle East or is this from the U.S.? He didn't know that either. So,
well, there's the formal agreement from '91.
Right, but if they're claiming that formal agreement is over, then they need to provide some sort of proof for it. And so my point was that they got a little soul searching to do before they can claim that they're no longer in communion with the World Orthodox, when in fact they probably are. They may well be.
World Orthodoxy is so bad that not even Monophysites want it.
I mean, I hate to say this, but it's really hit and miss. They have some really good people. They have some really traditional parishes, and then you have parishes that are indistinguishable from unions.
Yes.
And so that's it's a kind of becoming a mixed bag. It's problematic, to say the least. But the point is, what we do here is obviously we kind of try to expose the talking points, and that's something we've always been doing. I do want to mention, of course, to the audience that it is a live call-in, as we do every week. The fact that there are more people on does not mean people can't call in. And just click on the blue box on the top of the chat if you want to enter in. If you have questions, comments, etc., you name it. Okay. This is interesting. We've got a comment here. Remember asking about a bishop about the Havana Declaration, and he blew up on me. That's horrible. By the way, I have been putting the comments up on the screen, but because of the nature of the conversation, I haven't been responding. If there's something that you want me to respond to, just repeat yourself. It's fine. I'll take care of it. And so let me see here. Let's see. Okay. So basically, this was kind of unexpected. I don't mind. I like surprises, and they make things different. We were going to go through 3 different things, and now I guess I'm going to take care of the book review first, because we were going to cover the video review, because we had been requested multiple times to do a live response to this Father Peter Here's the Ecclesiastical Jungle video, and so we're going to do that tonight. And we're also, I was asked to, you all have asked, and to take care of the book on resistance to evil by force. Okay, I'm a little mad at you guys for this, because I like the book. What I wasn't told, and maybe I should have guessed this, but in comparison to the previous book, which was a nice, easy introduction on the ROKOR and the GOC, this is a real thick book, guys. Like, it's 200 pages, but y'all know that's not what I mean by thick. I mean, it is a deeply philosophical book written by a White Russian philosophy professor, and it's a good read, but it is an involved read. So I'm going to be quite honest with you. I have read up to page 48. There is also a 13-page introduction, so give me some credit there. And I'll go over with what I know. And this is actually going to be the first of multiple parts as I go through the book, because it's worth it. It is worth multiple shows. But I will say this. The book is very interesting. There was one particularly quotable note in here, which I thought was really good. And I just wanted to read that because it was so good. And what it said is, let me see here. Because it's talking about kind of the turning away from evil. It's at the beginning of chapter 2. And so it says, it's talking about, resisting evil at all. And so one thing that I like, this is what I mean. And you'll see what I mean by thick and by deep. It says, but he who does not resist evil at all, who refrains from denouncing it or giving reprimand, even though quite internally focused and silent, if that was possible, is already engaged in internal resistance fraught with practical conclusions and tensions, struggle and opposition. Moreover, for however long there is a dislike in the soul, or at least a vague disgust, then the person still resists. He perhaps does not rise up in any way, but he is still divided. He fights within himself, and as a result, the very acceptance of evil fails him. Even while completely passive externally, he resists evil internally, condemns it, is indignant, exposes it before himself, does not succumb to his fears and temptations, and even succumbing in part, reproaches himself for it, gathers with the Spirit, resents himself, turns away from it, and is purified in repentance. Even when drowning, he resists and does not sink. But this is why the total absence of all resistance, both internal and external, requires that condemnation be stopped, so that censure will cease, so that the approval of evil will prevail. Therefore, the non-resistor of evil sooner or later arrives at the need to assure himself that the evil is not so bad, and that it is not so definitely evil, that it has some positive features, that there are many of them, that they may even predominate. And only insofar as he manages to talk himself out of voicing his healthy disgust and the assurances of black and white does he distinguish the remnants of resistance and self-realization. And when aversion subsides and evil is no longer experienced as evil, then acceptance imperceptibly becomes total. The soul begins to believe that black is white, adapts to match, becomes black itself, and finds that it approves and enjoys, and of course this evil gives great pleasure. I thought that was a fantastic quote, although I will say it is emblematic of kind of, it's quite dense. It's quite emblematic of the book in general. The first 4 chapters, which I've already read, have gone through kind of the discussion of internal and external resistance to evil, or to good, actually. It works both ways. And that external kind of forces, even like natural disasters, for example, are not, they're not in and of themselves evil. What is evil is the human reaction to it, because human and good and evil are human responses. So it is actually, it's actually really good. And until chapter 5, it doesn't really start getting into the problem of, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't get into the problem of actually resisting evil in a practical sense until we get to chapter 5. It is worth noting, and the translator does make this very clear, even though I may disagree with this, that he is responding to the work of the Tolstoyites, who were apparently complete ultra-pacifist heretics. But what it comes down to is, for somebody who's familiar with the church, like the translator assumes that the person's more familiar with Tolstoy than Orthodoxy. And in that sense, basically, like, it's good. It has a lot of footnotes in that sense, but like, I already knew Tolstoy was evil, so I knew that, and he was excommunicated. So I knew that if, Professor Ilyin was saying it was evil, I mean, I was just taking his word for it. So I didn't even need a lot of the footnotes. But it's a great read so far. I can't wait to I can't wait to continue reading it, but I will cover it in another show. So let me say that part, and we're good on that. And so we will definitely follow up on this as I go through the book. Okay, and I'm running through for comments here. Are you Yatish? Sava will call in. Yes, good to have you too, Yatish. Good to see you, Sava. Good to see you too. Am I being enlisted? Not sure what that means. Yes. You enlisted me this morning, so I'm enlisting you tonight. Okay. I don't even know what to talk about. Then okay. So I guess it's look, nobody has to be afraid to call in. Anyone can call in. That's what the blue box is for. But if you don't feel like calling in, you don't have to.
Let me ask Liturgical Lazer a question, and maybe everybody can. Liturgical, your family came from Eastern Slovakia.
Yes.
Okay.
Half of my family.
Half German,
Yeah.
and you would consider them Carpatho-Russian.
Yes.
Or Russian.
Russian, yeah.
And what is for those who don't quite understand, what is the relationship between Carpatho-Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, regular Russians, and then of course we talked about groups like the Limkos and the Hutzels. It's just you start to hear about these other East Slavic groups that nobody has ever heard about.
So the so-called Carpatho-Russians or Rusins or Rusini or Rusnachki are people who have never had a country. They have a flag, they have a language, they have a culture, food and dance and all that. It resembles Ukrainian, it resembles Slovak, actually a little bit of Hungarian. And so, but like the Basque people of Spain,
yes, a nation without a state.
A nation without a state, exactly. So the Carpatho-Russians are often called Little Russians. They were called Little Russians during the Great Russian Empire. Okay, so there's Sava. Okay, hi Sava.
Hello. Sorry, I'm trying to get things set up.
Okay, so the so you have various groups of Carpatho-Russians, and obviously they inhabit the Carpathian Mountains. So the Hutzels are a sort of a hillbilly types. They live in the high peaks of the Carpatho Mountains, more towards southern, like Ukraine and near Hungary and Romania area.
But so, more linguistically Ukrainian, wouldn't you
of course
say?
they are linguistically Ukrainian. So those are the Hutzels, and they're sort of like a tribe. And so they are in the high Carpathians, whereas, for example, my mother's family, we are from what we call the Carpathian foothills. So the rolling slopes of the western side of the Carpathian Mountains. The western side of the Carpathian Mountains is like Slovakia. The eastern side is Galicia or Western Ukraine. Okay, so actually, Benedict once asked, is there any animosity between the Slovaks and the Rusins? And the answer is no. It's really interesting that these two ethnic groups get along. Of course, there are similarities, but the Carpatho-Russians actually are a really humble people. And the reason that is because they've always been overlorded by Polish, by Austria-Hungary, Germans at one point, Russians, Soviets. So because they've always been sort of under someone else's yoke, they've just never had anything of their own. The only thing they have is their culture. Now, of course, they were always considered they were always Orthodox. They were baptized by Saint Cyril and Methodius and their missionaries. They were baptized well before Rus was baptized. So and obviously baptized into the Orthodox, pre-schism church and all that. The unfortunate thing actually, it's not your question. Okay. So now there are various types of Rusins, and those who are sort of identify more with being sort of Western Slav, Eastern Slovak. Different from that would be someone like people from my family who identified as being Russian. So when my uncles would visit there and the relatives would come from Russia, they would say, we are speaking po-Ruski. It's not really Russian, but it's like their dialect. They think it's Russian, because they're very, I was telling Bishop Enoch earlier, so my uncles and aunts, their parents in southern Ontario as children, did not send them to Ukrainian school, did not send them to the Slovak school. They sent them to the Russian school to learn how to sing, dance, and play the balalaika and learn the Russian songs. So like my aunts were always singing Kalinka, Kalinka, Kalinka Moya, the Russian songs, because that's how we identified.
So how much of this, there was no animosity between Carpatho-Russians and Veliki, or Great Russians, in other words?
No,
you never heard
no.
of. So is a lot of this anti-Russianness that comes out of Ukraine, is this more of a manufactured? That's not
well,
the
because
situation
they
you
were.
think?
Oh, you would be better answer that.
It's such that's a huge question.
No, I know. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, now someone did ask, Vasily asked Lazer if he knows about the miracle sign of 2007 when pronouncing union with the MP that the holy icon of St. John Maximovich fell from its spot later.
I
don't know if you'd heard
about that instance. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so the difference in Carpatho-Russians and Ukrainians and Russians.
That was actually your question.
Yes.
Yeah. So the difference.
Oh, another one came in for Liturgical Lazer. It's from Father Boniface, and he asked, would Liturgical Lazer comment on the history of Archbishop Orestes, and how would he look at the Carpatho-Russian Orthodox today?
Who's Archbishop Orestes?
He's Archbishop. I assume he's talking about Archbishop Orestes Chernik, who was, I guess he was the first bishop made by Constantinople for the ECRA, the American Carpatho-Russian Archdiocese. It was like they kind of didn't join with Father Alexis's movements to the Metropolitan. They applied directly to the Ecumenical Patriarchate instead.
Okay,
He looked. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
He looked kind of uniate, didn't he? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That one. Okay.
Choir dress.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know much about that sort of jurisdictional sort of thing, but the people who call themselves Carpatho-Russians obviously are Carpatho-Russian heritage. But there was they were all most of them were former uniates, thanks to Saint Alexis Toth.
Father Alexis brought him out of union.
So they kept a lot of their uniate sort of customs and very sort of low church stuff. And so even though they might have glorious iconostases and whatnot, they are very they don't take the fast seriously, and of course their new calendar, so they are culturally they are very modern.
Their first abbess. Did you ever see a picture of their first?
Oh no. So Barnabas. Okay, so what do you know about the first abbess of the Carpatho-Russian diocese under the Fanar? You're talking about?
She accompanied Alexis Toth, I think, and started a convent. I think it might have been Pennsylvania, but I could be wrong. I saw a photograph of them. They're wearing the Latin Basilian habit. I mean, Latinized Basilian habit. So they look like Roman Catholic nuns. And she's standing there with a jezzel, like a Russian jezzel.
Uh-huh.
And
staff.
I don't think they lasted very long. And I don't think they numbered more than a handful. I don't know what happened to them eventually.
Weren't isn't New Skeet like Carpatho-Russian heritage of some sort?
No, they were founded by Franciscans.
Franciscans.
Okay. Yes.
Well, from Steubenville, maybe.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting about the Carpatho-Russian, so you had the ones that joined the Fanar, and that was in the late 30s, I believe. All right, that's what they taught. That's the Carpatho. That's where Akrod comes from. But then you had, as you mentioned, those under Father Alexis Toth.
Yes.
We talked about him earlier today about how he comes to America. He has to meet with the Roman Catholic head of the Roman Catholic Church, John Ireland, in America, and he's like, "Who are you? I don't want you here. Go back. Leave."
Yeah, you don't want married clergy here. Shave off your beard.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, and just go to the Polish church. It's just the same. You're just Polish. That's all you really are. I mean, pretty insulting.
Yeah, very insulting.
And I believe there had already been movements throughout the early as the 1800s of uniates voluntarily simply saying, why are we where we are?
Right.
Why don't we just simply go back to orthodoxy of our ancestors?
Right. Yeah.
And the biggest instance of that, people forget, when they had Brest-Litovsk in 1597, 1598, the original Union,
Brest-Litovsk.
yes, it was what we call Ukraine and Belarus.
Okay.
All right. And we remember how, like, Ukraine comes back into Orthodoxy gradually. There was a period in which they had no Orthodox bishops for like a 25-year period in Ukraine. And the Cossack Brotherhood basically kept Orthodoxy alive they just had priests coming from Russia or who didn't commemorate the Union of Bishops. And eventually the Patriarch of Jerusalem was visiting in 1620 Russia, Patriarch Theophanes, and the Cossacks smuggled him into Polish-controlled Ukraine, and he did a consecration of Joe Boretsky to be the Metropolitan of Kiev. And then they together, over the successive days, made more bishops.
Right.
But then Orthodoxy essentially retook large portions of the country. Even today, people forget the Union population of Ukraine is only about 5%. It's not like 50%. It's not as big as people. Even those Western Galatian areas, a lot of them are still like 55%. People will call themselves Orthodox.
Yeah,
but a lot of them are just disaffected.
Yes, but
they don't care about.
I understand, but they're not Union. Is my point. They're not formally Union, I guess you'd say. But even though Poland was defeated, the Russian Empire, liberates those areas, Belarus was still Union up until 1839. And I was talking to Barnabas and Father, of Velika the other day about this. So, they had all these movements, and the big was the Palat Sobor. So where Metropolitan Joseph Shemeshko, who's the Union Metropolitan of Minsk, and his other bishops, they totally did not want to be part of the Roman Catholic Church anymore. The Palat Sobor happens. They formally unite with Orthodoxy. Over a period of a few weeks, millions of people come back into the Church of their ancestors. That's just a continuous movement. Even when the Russian army in 1916 moved into Galatia, when they were fighting the Austrians.
Yes.
Okay. There was a spontaneous, something like over, half the population just came out and said they wanted to come back and be part of the church. Right. Because at this point, the Austrians weren't controlling them.
Oh, they sure did.
They weren't afraid of persecution.
Right.
So you have like hundreds of thousands, few hundred thousand people,
right,
coming back into Orthodoxy.
Right.
So the movement of figures like Father Alexei Toth, back into Orthodoxy, like in 1905, Father Joseph, 1906.
Yeah,
Under I think Saint Tikhon was Archbishop of.
I think he died in 1909, so it was before that.
Yes, maybe it was even actually the 1890s or something like that.
Right.
Yes, and I remember in case of Father Alexis Toth, he met with like the Russian ambassador in San Francisco. He was trying to figure out how to bring his communities in. So there was this continuous movement.
1890. It was 1890.
In fact, Velika Metropolitan John, when he was back in the 60s, when he was Roman Catholic, and he was in the Roman Catholic seminary, there were some Union seminarians who went to the Latin seminary he was part of.
Right.
And he asked them, what do they preach in these Union churches? And the seminarian says, almost every sermon's about you got to stay with the Pope no matter what.
Yes, exactly.
There's always, they're going to work that in somewhere into the sermon, because they were terrified of the people just simply going back to what the religion of their ancestors,
right? Exactly,
which is the Orthodox Church.
Yes,
and they already and they sort of probably knew the Vatican hierarchy treated them like second-class citizens and kind of garbage to begin with.
Exactly.
And their own hierarchy, in many cases, didn't even respect their own traditions.
The bishops that the Vatican liked, of course, were like my former Uniate bishop in Toronto, who were Latinizing as much as possible. For example, my parishioners said, I said, why don't you fast? Oh, because Bishop said we now in Canada no need to fast. So that's an old country thing, fasting, old country thing, village thing. We don't need to do that here. Yeah, that sort of thing. So, and of course,
very interesting accent there. Anyway, actually, Remnant Ruse asked, were there any Carpatho-Russians who became true Orthodox?
Individuals, not whole churches.
Keep in mind that really true Orthodoxy, again, when you're talking about it, you have to, as we just see it in terms of we're the Orthodox. And so because of the fact that a lot of things happened over different periods of time, there were people who became true Orthodox just even over the union with the Moscow Patriarchate, etc. But it's it's not like how do I put this? If there were kind of like in world Orthodoxy and they came to us, that's common. But I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean,
Well,
technically,
Father,
you, Vladika.
Father Joseph, before the capitulation of ROKOR, half of Jordanville were Carpatho-Russians who were true Orthodox.
I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, because the Brotherhood of St. Joseph of Chayev came from Vladimirovo, and of course, that's in the Carpathian foothills, again, not far from my mother's village. So, yes, of course, they were, now Vladika Loris and Father Flores, they spoke Rusini dialect, which is what I thought they would be speaking. But, of course, they just chose to speak High Russian, and of course, they spoke High Russian.
Is there sort of an embarrassment about talking Carpatho-Russian?
Absolutely, yeah. So, like I said to Vladika Enoch this afternoon, I said the only time Father Flor spoke and Father and Archbishop Loris spoke Russian was Father Flor was upset, and he would talk to the Metropolitan Loris in Russian dialect, and he got angry. Yes, and so he did not speak High Russian.
You couldn't just get away with talking potatoes at that point.
Yeah. So
Reader John asks, wasn't there a time when Ukraine was not called Ukraine?
Of course.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Ukraine just means the borderland, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Ukraine on the border.
On the border of what? Of the Empire of Russia.
Of the real country.
Yes, of the real country. Yeah. So
remember
that's what I try to explain sometimes that a lot of Russians just see the Ukraine situation as fratricidal because they see it as the same country.
Yes, of course, it's
well, to an extent, but you have to be very specific when you're talking about the areas because there's nothing fraternal between Russians and Galicians.
There were two movements going on in the Uniate Church, and one was, as of course, like Father Alexis told, people moving towards Orthodoxy. Yes, hillbilly Ukrainian. Yes, people moving towards Orthodoxy, and then you had the opposite, where people like the bishop I was under were afraid of more Orthodox, like three-barred crosses and whatnot. And so I got in trouble because the cathedral I was in had no iconostas whatsoever. There were beautiful mosaics, but no iconostas. And so I converted the very unused, large sort of living room into a small winter chapel. I built an iconostas, and the famous story is...
this is when you were union priest, right?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. So
1980s.
1980s. And so the bishop really... didn't visit that often. So I had built this thing with icons, with doors and all that. He walked in, he lost his mind. He said, "Oi, oi, oi, no." So he forbade me to serve in it. Yeah, because...
You had to disassemble it?
No, he left it.
I left it. But the thing is, when I brought the old ladies in, they said, yeah, just like an old country. So what? The icons, the priest on this door comes around, and with gospel book, we know. Yeah, so yeah, the point is they were familiar with it. And again, him telling them so this movement of Latinization, and the bishop did not like the Carpatho-Russians of the USA because the movement was already starting to return to their roots. Okay. And so you had, again, like there's a Uniate convent, those nuns, the bridegroom, what are they called?
Yeah, Christ the bridegroom.
Christ the bridegroom, yeah. So already...
But they're all Latins, I think.
No, they're Eastern Rite. They're Eastern.
Now, but I think they're all from Latin background.
Oh, maybe. But for example, that convent of young nuns were all wearing this sort of Roman Catholic habit. Well, they are in the full Eastern Orthodox monastic apostolic now, and three-barred crosses. They're still Uniate, but again, they're realizing their roots, saying we were betrayed, we were lied to. And so anyways, Father...
it's important to remember that was also encouraged by the Second Vatican Council. Right. So ever since then, they've been, especially like the Melkites have been pushing that. There's a dark underside to that. Huh?
No, I was just going to say it was encouraged long before Vatican II. It was encouraged by Cardinal Tisserand, for example, from about 1930, strenuously, and before that, we can go back to Leo XIII.
Right, but the thing you have to remember is that there there were still a lot of cases. Like I knew cases in living memory of Uniate people that I had met who went to Catholic school, for example, and they had to get a confirmation, and they'd explain, no, we're Eastern Rite. They're like, no, you still have to get the confirmation. It would become quite a mess because they, as you know, they were already chrismated. So the point is, it made no sense for them to get chrismated again, but it did happen.
Now the Uniates are even in a worse situation because you got Pope Francis approving same-sex unions. That's the union. That's what the union has led to. The union has led to union with the Vatican at this point, and they can't do anything about it. You know, they're. I mean, well, they can leave and become anybody can leave and become Orthodox in these groups. You know. But it doesn't seem at this point that, you know, I guess the Uniate hierarchies pretty much are solidified behind the Vatican at this point. I don't know if there's any movement to do anything. Because look, if they're going to go along with everything that's happened the past 60, 70 years theologically, I mean, in terms of more and more modernism, you know, what are they going to do? I mean, because I don't think there's been a single case of a Uniate bishop in the past 70. When was the last time you ever heard of a Uniate bishop actually becoming Orthodox?
Right.
Lay people, yes.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
But they're not going to put you in that hierarchical position unless they know you're loyal.
Absolutely. You have to be absolutely loyal. And so,
especially with Uniates.
Oh, yes. And so the bishop I was under, of course, was constantly flying to Rome. In fact, he sent me to seminary in Rome, you know, but unfortunately I started
seminary in Rome.
Yes, I lived in Rome for 3 years.
The Ukrainian seminary.
I lived at the Ukrainian seminary because it was the closest there. But unfortunately,
they had no Carpatho-Russian seminary.
Yes, no
Ruthenian seminary.
The old one was the Greek seminary in Babylon.
What the poor bishop didn't know was that I was starting to secretly go to the Russicum, which is a Russian Catholic college, learning Russian, learning Slavonic. And here's another fun story. So the Russian college did not want every year the Pope.
Yeah, I've heard about the Russicum. Yeah, tell us more about this.
Oh, the Russicum was run by Jesuits, and they were, of course, again, high church uniates, and so they, ironically, they were Catholic, but they couldn't stand the Pope, and so so every year for the Easter services or Good Friday services in the Vatican, they have all these readers in different languages, and so the Vatican needed someone to read in Russian. So the Russian Russicum approached me and said, "Oh, you read Russian, you like Russian? Would you read in the Vatican?" Because I thought, sure. So I went in and we had a rehearsal, and I read the epistle in Russian. Again, a Uniate seminarian, right? Not Orthodox, of course, and so. Apparently, I read so well that the Pope was slightly frightened, or I don't know if that's the right word. And so he came up to me. So you greet the Pope. The Pope greets all the readers, and he came up to me, pointed to me and said Italian, and squinted his eyes and said, "Where are you from?"
This was John Paul II.
John Paul II. Sorry, John Paul II. Yeah. So in
he would know because he was a Slav.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So where are you from? And I said, I'm from Canada. And he, who's your bishop? I said to my bishop was, and he went, aha, because the bishop I was under was very pro-Vatican, very, Latinizing. Yeah. So I just want to say one more thing about my family, and that is to give this sort of identity of Carpatho-Russians and their sentiment. My grandparents took my mother. Well, there was no, when they immigrated, there was no Uniate church in the hometown. There was, however, a Russian Orthodox mission church served out of Buffalo, New York. The priest came once or twice a month. So they were walking on the street of this old town, and they saw the three-barred cross, and my grandparents said, "Oh, to nasha vera. That's our faith over there." So they took my mother to be baptized there. So then when my mother met my father, who was, Roman Catholic, the Roman Catholic priest said, "Okay, bring me your baptism certificate." So my mother brought her baptism certificate with Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Greek Catholic Church, because that's what they called it back then, right? And so in Slavonic, or Russian, and the three-barred cross. And the Roman Catholics said, "Oh, this poor child has to be baptized," so they rebaptized her. So that was in the 50s.
Yeah. So whenever everyone says
40s.
So whenever people bring up this is just some fanatic Orthodox zealot nonsense of rebaptizing people,
Yes.
Roman Catholics have a long
They
history
sure do.
of
Yes.
rebaptizing. The Rituale Romanum from the 50s says all Protestants have to be given at least conditional baptism. And even when the Vatican went into Egypt among the Monophysites, who do triple immersion baptism,
Okay.
the Copts still did.
Right.
The Vatican in the 1880s said you can't trust anything Copts do because they're incompetent and they don't do nothing right. So everybody just rebaptize everybody and not have to worry about it. And they did the same thing in the 17th century to Bulgaria, like when the Austrians conquered parts of Bulgaria, the Hungarian Empire, whatever, Austro-Hungarian Empire. They sort of like when they come across Bulgarian villages, they just say, we don't want to deal with it. Just force them to get rebaptized.
Yes.
So, the Roman Catholic position is all, with these ecumenical agreements they made with the World Orthodox, these baptismal agreements. This is all essential. This is all part of it. Is one side as ecumenism.
Yes.
The other is Roman Catholicism doesn't like to have anybody delegitimize them. They don't like anybody. They are fine with challenging everybody else's authenticity about something, but they don't like the idea. It's like Adrian Fortescue, who was a Jesuit. May not be a Jesuit, but was a late 19th century Roman Catholic historian who wrote several books, like the Eastern Church. His book about Orthodoxy essentially was this like country bumpkin religion, and they're just too stupid. They're not really heretics because they're too stupid to know any better. And if they knew what their religion was, they would be heretics because they're ignorant.
Right.
But that's essentially the attitude. And he makes some comment about that we make uniates of them, they don't make uniates of us. Because that was simply the attitude. It was just like a domineering imperial attitude. All right, that these are all like wayward buffoons who just don't know any better, and they're going to be brought under to heel eventually. Well, obviously, yes.
Vitali asks, ask anyone of significance of Saint Athanasius of Brest for breaking the Brest-Litovsk Union. He's the main figure on the first saint influencing rebuke uniates. Okay, that's actually a statement. I thought it was a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
No, it says ask anyone.
Yes.
I thought ask. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah, well, I mean, remember, people forget when they had the Brest-Litovsk Union,
yes.
There were priests ceasing commemoration. And these newly uniate bishops like, well, why? You can't do that. Mm-hmm. The same thing you see today. Among like World Orthodox, they were saying, "Oh, you're going into schism. It doesn't matter what." The bishops would say, "Well, we believe in Orthodoxy," but the priests like, "Well, you're in communion with the Pope."
Right.
And well, no, it doesn't matter. They would argue is it doesn't matter who we're in communion with. You just have to be concerned about what your bishop believes, irrespective of what he is involved with.
Sound familiar, guys?
Yeah, exactly. And remember, they brought and eventually, of course, the Ecumenical Patriarchate was still not at least Orthodox at this point.
Yeah,
they sent the Patriarch of Alexander, Meletius Pegos, into that part of Ukraine with some other bishops. They held a council and they formally deposed all the uniate bishops. They said, like, you got to come back, and they didn't. They held a deposition. Now they couldn't really consecrate new bishops because the Polish king kind of kicked them out not long after. And that was sort of the strategy that the Polish and the Roman Catholics were hoping, that if we can keep Orthodox bishops out of the country, because they controlled large portion of what we call Ukraine long enough, then these Cossacks, we can sort of force uniatism gradually, because they're not going to have a supply of priests. Right. All right. Now, of course, they could always come across from Russia, which is what they did. And you, in fact, had large numbers. In fact, in 1620, they had a council in Moscow under Patriarch Filaret Nikitich Romanov, who was the father of the Tsar. And at the council, they were like, what are we supposed to do with all these people coming from the borderline for Ukraine? Okay. Because they didn't know who was baptized by the uniates, who was not. It was an extremely confusing situation. All right. So they had to, deal with, that situation there. But okay, I'm sorry.
No, I noticed that Sava, your mic's off, so I guess you had some questions or comments.
Oh, I'm just listening. I know someone mentioned earlier about the Unionites. They have an organization in the Ukrainians. Some of the other Unionites, they might have some similar. It's the people call it like the Unionites SSPX. It's trying to fight Latinization.
Society of
St.
St.
Josephat.
Yeah,
Could
Josaphat of Belgrade or something is what they named it after.
Who's our trade to
Josaphat
excommunicate them?
Kuncevich, the one,
Yeah.
the
one who killed
murderer of
the-
Poles,
yeah.
what he was called.
A professional snitch.
Come again?
He was a professional snitch. His entire job was to rat out people that were still Orthodox.
Yeah, but he
And,
actually was
one of
violent
them-
towards them. and,
Snitching was one of the nicer things he did.
Yeah, well, he went to that village. How he ended up dying, his quote unquote martyred him. He ends up coming to a Ukrainian village. They hang something like 16 people, including like kids, like 12-year-old children. Terrorize the village to accept the Unia. The Polish army stays around. Then Kuncevich is like, you can leave. These people aren't going to do anything. Well, then, a few days after the army leaves,
he goes into a church, he kicks the altar down.
Well, no, that's not. See, the version I've heard was that a crowd gathers out in front of his house. They call him out. He starts to argue with him, and someone hits him in the head with an axe.
The way I heard it was that he literally attacked the liturgy the night before, like they were doing private services, and he actually knocked over the altar. He left, and then the mob came, and then he was hit with the axe.
Okay, so
that's the way I heard.
Okay, so after the Polish army leaves, he discovers people going back to holding Orthodox services. He attacks them, and then he incites mob action. I'm not endorsing, but obviously,
we are not endorsing violence.
He was. I mean, you got to deal with it. If you're going to some rural Ukrainian or whatever Carpatho-Russian village, I'm not sure, some village in that area, and you murder 16 people.
Oh yeah,
people's kids. They're going to be a law unto themselves.
Yes,
as far as they're not going to consider Josaphat Kuncevich to be a bishop just because the Pope ordained him.
Right.
All right. He's just insane heretic terrorizing the countryside.
Yeah, you can't commit atrocities and then say, "Oh well, we have to respect his position."
And so this is the hero of the traditionalists of the SSPX, there, Sava.
Yep, that's their hero. That's who they look up to, apparently. But I know you were. Go ahead.
No, sorry, Cardinal Hussar excommunicated them. When were they gaining ground? Like after 2000?
Oh,
right?
the Society of Social Josephat. Well, see, I believe Richard Williams was the one who was the kind of the dissident SSPX bishop.
Right, I know.
I think he was the one that went to Ukraine and did ordinations for them.
Okay.
Because they're big into keeping Latinizations.
Oh yes.
In fact, the Josaphat group is like, they don't want to accept. They want to keep the statues,
right?
Everything like you people like you or didn't like. They're like, no, that's the real Ukrainian Catholic society.
Incidentally, sorry, another very quick little story. So when I was in the Ukrainian seminary, it was my so-called subdeacon ordination. I was in my second year of seminary there, and I decided, so we had again, they made up some of their services. So at the tonsure of a reader, or subdeacon rather, you had to read the creed. So I read the creed in Slavonic without the filioque. So the rector of the seminary came right up to me, put his a hand on my arm and said, "You must say Isina," which means "and the sun." You must say Isina, start again.
Which he made up because you didn't have to say it.
Yes, exactly. And so I did it again, and of course, the seminaries were horrified, and so I had sort of guests coming, and they said there was a very muted sort of celebration after, and then my friend said to me, "But the point is, you did it the first time without it. You made the statement."
Well, that's interesting because. the other day, Vladika and Lazer, I was telling him about in the life of Saint Pius Velichovsky, who came from areas of Ukraine.
Yeah.
He and one of his companions, they were determined to go to Mount Athos, and so they were traveling through the areas controlled by Poland, and they came across this village, and they stopped at the church, all right, for Sunday morning, and the Polish nobleman was there. He was at the kleros, and the reader was supposed to be going to sing the creed, the symbol of faith.
Yes.
Okay, and the Poles obviously didn't know Slavonic that well. All right, so how it was explained to me, and then you give me some context.
Yes.
It was explained to me in the English translation that the reader said, "Who proceedeth from the Father truly," and that they use this word like istinu.
Yes.
All right, which is in fact an old ritualist way of saying it. But if you don't know Slavonic very well,
right,
you can see. I think the Poles were trying to hear if the Orthodox who were being forced in the Unia would say
Isina, which means from the sun. Isina.
So how would the creed go?
So the creed Iduka. I remember Slavonic now. Iduka iskodiashtigo, otsa isina iskodiashtigo, otsa isina. But what they did was they substituted the word the truth. So otsa istina or
voistina.
No, istina. Yeah.
Like Istinu Pravoslavy, like true Orthodox.
Yeah.
But you proceeded from the true Son. Wouldn't it be proceeded truly?
He's using Istina as a replacement for Isina.
Well, the point is it sounded to the Polish nobleman.
It sounded like
whatever the Polish word must be similar for son to the
sin.
Sin, exactly.
Yes.
So istinu sounded like something like sinya, I guess. Or something.
No, istina and sina.
Yes.
The two words are istina and sina, but if said really quickly, they sound identical. Yeah. So they tried.
Istina, is and son.
So and son. Isina. Yeah. So.
And last word that I know of about this Society of Saint Pius Josaphat. Cardinal Hussar, who used to be my abbot, so I know something about him. He did excommunicate them, and it didn't take for some reason. I don't know what condition he didn't fulfill. And Rome was fine with it. They said, go ahead, you want to excommunicate them. But when they appealed to Rome, I guess he had not held a trial. And so they were able to reclaim status and say, no, see, we're legitimate. Ha ha.
I mean, you even have groups in Ukraine, like this one guy claiming to be the Ukrainian Greek Catholic patriarch. That's not the other guy, not the major, not the official patriarch.
Mr.
No. This is it's a Greek Catholic group under this Patriarch Elias. And anyway,
I've never heard of
the Ukrainian situation. Just continues to devolve into.
So they are pro
something,
pro-Oriental.
There's some sort of Unia group that doesn't like the Vatican, but they don't want to be Orthodox.
Oh,
well, not impossible, but very confusing.
I've met angry Maronites.
They're like a set of a conscious unions.
So they don't like the Vatican because they're not Latin. I don't know. Good Lord.
There's some sort of nuns who had visions involved in it. So that tells you that eventually, if you have a set of a conscious group or a traditionalist Roman Catholic group, unfortunately, eventually women with visions start to show up, nuns and things. And that's when things... I mean, that happens in the official Roman Catholic Church anyway. So
things base entire theology
everywhere from Fatima to Medjugorje.
Oh yes.
To be fair, not just Medjugorje, but the one in Queens too. Those were not nuns; they were just lay women.
And that was the stuff that happened on Long Island about the or something island. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then Brazil with the
ones in the parking lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just
the
parking lot visions
at the McDonald's.
They didn't have a tree, but they had a flagpole.
Okay.
I was gonna say, Reader John's joined the chat. I was kind of curious if you had questions, comments, thoughts. We're listening.
Any comments on the chat before we get into any other conversation?
No, I covered them mostly. It was just comments on that and a couple of LOLs that I didn't see before.
I would like to ask Father Joseph a question.
Sure.
I really don't know who those nuns are, now that I think of it, those ex-Basilians.
Mhm.
But they somehow entered Orthodoxy. They retained their Roman Catholic habits, picked up a Jezel.
Locutions. Yeah.
What does that say about that mentality? Of course, we can't know what their mentality was.
The ones in the 30s you're talking about, the joint, yeah.
Or prior to that.
Pizza Hut apparition.
Like, what does that say about their mentality?
If we're gonna be honest, I don't know that that's. I mean, I can't judge.
Right.
You know, in many cases,
Well, I'm just wondering if their rejection of Catholicism is ethnic, or if it's liturgical, or if it's theological.
Well, I mean, there were court cases that were held over the buildings where that one strategy that Roman Catholic lawyers tried to use was to put people on the stand and delineate directly what the difference was between their previous church and their present one. And in many cases, they couldn't. But a lot of them were very simple people, and I think that
Right.
you know they kind of had a feel for what was right and what was wrong. And
Yeah.
I can't deny that to the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. I don't think that's. I'm in other words, I would not treat them as badly as a Roman Catholic lawyer.
Right.
I believe that their intentions were good, and they were obviously lasting and fruitful. And many Orthodox people, you know, are in the church today because of that.
Well, you know, there's historical examples of the sort of like Orthodox feeling even before you come about with logical arguments.
Right.
After there was a I think Saint Dionysius of Milan, I think was the Bishop of Milan. We have more Union Pizza. Okay, we'll have to talk. But see,
Don't make us hungry.
Okay. So the Arians through subterfuge exiled the Orthodox Bishop of Milan in around the 350s. And in his place, they put a man from Asia Minor, Auxentius, who was an Arian, into the See of Milan illegally. All right. And the people, initially, the preaching sounded like it was Orthodox preaching. Right. The Arians. Like the Arians would say, oh, Christ is God of God. He's light of light. But they meant something. You can't go that way, Politica, because of the court. You got to go around here. But what happens is people like St. Hilary Portiers, those individuals begin to detect, you know, there's something doesn't just seem right, if you know what I mean, Father Joseph.
Right. Yeah.
And then that leads to further investigation into it. All right. So.
Oh, the Coke.
Okay, he's looking for Diet Coke. Okay.
May I ask a question to Sava?
Yes.
Sava?
Hello. Hi.
Are you Serbian?
No, not by blood.
Oh, okay, just it looks like a Serbian. All right. So Sava, are you the young gentleman from Louisiana?
Yes. It's the stories about how I showed up unannounced at the Abbey.
What's that? What's that?
Well, we're not concerned about that anymore. We're Jordanville.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to say, no need to reiterate it, but I very much enjoyed your stories of your adventures at Jordanville, especially meeting, was it Archbishop Luke? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I was about to say that's why I was so interested in your Jordanville stories, because I had an interesting experience there.
Oh yes.
Also, Vitali, samo slogo se bi nas pasava. Just seeing that in the chat there.
Hi there.
Yes. So yes, I am glad you enjoyed the stories. I had an interesting experience at Jordanville. I want to go back.
Yes, actually, we
don't tell them you're coming, so they can't start washing the floor.
Yeah. So, we ordered something from there, and they are at 6s and 7s. They got the order so confused. So tomorrow morning we are departing from the Abbey, and we are driving back to Ontario, and we are going to. I sent an email saying we will stop in to pick up our items if they are still there. and I have 2 icons to pick up, also prints.
Oh,
And so,
no.
yes.
See, now you're saying it online in public now.
You said it
Oh,
on
boy.
this channel. Now there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
If you see the camera guy, can you say hello for me?
So I'm expecting cameras in my faces, is my point.
If you see the camera guy, say hello to him for me.
Okay. I will do that. Yeah. So, oh my goodness.
Tell him hello. I didn't get to really talk to him much.
I'm going to go very quietly and just go to the bookstore, ask for my item, and I'm going to leave. That's it. Oh no, we
Yes.
will venerate the tomb of Saint Philaret. We will do that. Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes,
also
definitely.
we'll visit the cemetery up on the hill there. Yeah. So yeah.
One of the interesting things I'd like to point out, since we're talking about like the Latinizations and the
Right.
Uniate rites and such, is when you look at the things that you're talking about, like statuary, the rosary, taking down icon, templon screens, essentially, these are really late Renaissance, very, very early Baroque, like 1500s innovations in the West. That, for example, you go back to before the schism, even for centuries after it, you know, the average church in the West had either a choir screen,
Right.
or it had the low bar but with the pillars on it, you know, the classic templon. We see many of those in Italy. They had them in St. Peter's Basilica. So what's essentially happening is the innovations of the Renaissance and then the Counter-Reformation essentially got imposed as, quote unquote, as like the true Latin tradition or whatever, when it was just simply made up by the Jesuits and various other groups as a reaction to Protestant criticism. So that gets sort of forced onto everybody else. And it's really a deformity, even from like the, pre-1500s, I mean, obviously, definitely pre-schism, but pre-1500s Western religious, manifestations.
Devotions, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, people don't realize a lot of things people take as like somehow fundamental devotions, like Sacred Heart. You're talking about they come from like Mary Alacoque's visions in 1690, or Immaculate. When it was the Immaculate Heart was even later.
Yes.
It's just in the Immaculate Conception, 1848.
Inaccurate misconception.
The inaccurate misconception. One thing after the other, and these simply made Roman Catholicism just increasingly more alien to the history of everything that happened before that. So, I mean, it's just, if you join it in like sort of an infected, heretical, schismatic body like that, this infection is simply going to spread to all the other limbs. It happened in Uni, which is what happened. And look, you can find, if you want to talk about like really super Latinized groups, if you ever study like the Maronites, all right, who were like a monophyllite group who joined the Vatican, obviously they have been heretics for a long time. You look at like the Maronites before the 1960s, their churches were like identical to French Tridentine Rite, style
Not
churches.
in every instance,
Well,
but many of them.
Yeah, they didn't. They certainly had no. They had gotten rid of their curtain for a long time.
They were offering Latin hosts in fiddlebacks.
Yes, exactly. In fact, even Mr. Joseph Shemeshko, when the Palazzo War happened, and he had to go around to different villages and correct usages because they'd taken all these people. One of the problems is like a lot of the Uniate clergy had been so Latinized in that they were using like fiddleback chasubles.
Yeah.
And the only thing that would look different is they had like the epimachia on their cups.
Yeah, which wasn't even all that Eastern, because they were in use in Rome until at least the 13th century.
So you can see how a lot of this was wherever I was going with it.
The question I've always, not question, but concern is that, are these people seeing how their church, so-called church, is completely falling apart? Are they interested in orthodoxy, or are they just going to fade into secular worldliness and not care? So how do we...
Well, Vladika John already said they're not up to taking anything seriously enough for that to matter to them anymore.
Because I think at one time, maybe we thought that maybe groups of people would want to join, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's just individuals that will wake up and, because our mission, of course, is to bring them into the church, and to be available, whether it's Eastern Rite or Western Rite or something, to be, and this is why we we brought this up at the Synod meeting to be more available, to be more exposed. And of course, this channel is, important and a blessing. But yes, but well, in Canada, Canada is extremely secular, extremely liberal, and there are a great deal of moral problems coming, of course, from the government and their agenda. And people are just so complacent.
Like euthanasia. That's.
Oh, God.
I think we are going to get it.
It's just really.
They said 10,000 people last year in Canada were euthanized.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and that's not just. I mean, it's just.
And now they want to euthanize the drug addicts.
It's just they found it's really a Machiavellian. It's cheaper to kill people.
Well, they set up clinics where you can shoot up here. Like they made these clinics where just you want to be on drugs. Here's a place where you can and they call it, quote, safe.
Well, that's a silent euthanasia because
exactly.
How many people die over there?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So
have some fentanyl.
Yes.
Now, Atomic Lead asks he says Jeffrey Hull in The Banished Heart talks a lot about how Jesuits imposed an attitude of minimalism and reductionism as a way to prevent people from jumping ship to Protestantism.
I'm familiar with that book.
So a lot of these Tradders identity people don't really understand what issues are really at stake. Most people will be more offended at denials of the Immaculate Conception than by Arianism. I haven't read the book, so tell me more about it.
Well, Hull's point, for example, he points out, and this is something Vladika John and I've talked to others. Father Brendan passed away years ago, used to mention this as well, that like the Jesuit churches in Rome, when they first started building them in Rome and Italy and Spain, they were the first churches to have this hardly any choir area. Because they weren't singing the divine office. They were, in fact, the first religious order within Roman Catholicism that had no obligation to publicly sing the divine office. Like the parochial clergy could theoretically get away with reciting the breviary, although even then many of them sung the vespers and offices in their churches. But the Jesuits specifically were prohibited from singing, having a choir office. All right. So that meant they didn't need a roots. That meant they also it meant that everything became a minimalistic attitude. Okay, they favored like low masses to an extreme. The Counter-Reformation, so-called Catholic Reformation with the Jesuits, they took down a number of rood screens throughout different. Like you're more likely to go into some Lutheran, that's it's no longer used as a museum piece, Lutheran church, and Saxony, because nobody goes there, and to find a Lettner or a rood screen from 1400 that the Lutherans just didn't get rid of because they didn't care.
Right.
Then if you go to a Roman Catholic church in Bavaria, and you'll see, just won't see any rood screens. Right. You just simply won't get. You can go to Scandinavian stave churches from 1150 that are at least up until the 1950s were still used, and you have the rood chancel barrier. That's not just a low-lying barrier; it's up in here.
And actually very similar to the arrangement in Spanish, like the old Asturian Spanish church.
Yes, the three doorways.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, in fact, you found that three doorway arch area in some Anglo-Saxon church. Like, for example, the church at Recolver that was blown up in the 1820s, where the Anglican vicar bought it and he just put I think like 100 barrels of gunpowder in and blew it up. And there went that ancient 6th century, 7th century Anglo-Saxon church.
One of our favorite churches in Rome was the Santa Maria in Cosmedin, which you had the like what's called the communion rail and the pillars, so you could see where the Santa Maria Cosmedin, where you could see where it.
You mean
the choir area? It's all marble.
The chancel
screen, and then a second screen behind it, and so you could see the remnants is there.
Yeah, because you have the choir. You have the choir screen area, but they took down the pillars, like you said.
Yeah.
And then you can see obviously the old chancel where they have still the transcena with the pillars.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
And Saint Clemente is another example where the pillars eventually came down. But that's also similar to the design they had in Monte Cassino for a very long time.
Right.
And
the cathedral in Torcello, right?
I believe
which still has a row of icons on top of the transcendent.
Yes, Torcello, Santa Maria Assunta. Yes, that's true. And also, if you ever, I'll give you an example. If you look at sketches made of St. Paul outside the walls, which is an ancient basilica built during the Constantinian period. used from the 1600s, and I have some of those. You can see the, obviously the altar, and then they have like the area you go down. Okay, but you still have the transcena pillar, pillars with the top over it going around it.
Right.
And of course, that was taken down in around the early 1700s. St. Paul's outside the wall burned down in the 1830s. Thank God it burned down then, because if it burned down in the 1630s, you'd get some horrific Baroque, or something not Baroque, even Baroque. It would have been worse. But yeah.
Father Boniface writes, Trad Catholics are stubborn in their papal supremacy, yet they have no pope, living a contradiction which they refuse to resolve. So afraid to cut the umbilical cord.
You got to be under the Pope, but there's no Pope. You got to acknowledge, theoretically, you got to be under the Pope if there was a Pope.
Yes.
Or you can't be saved if you're not under the Pope. It's just like I had some traditionalist Roman Catholic contacted me and said, there are no listed bishops and priests anymore, but you just got to say this one prayer of contrition, and then that's how you get into the church. I was like, this is insane.
There's no church.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no church to get into.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing there.
It's like a Roman Catholic version of the Shahada.
Well, you could just do what the group in Spain did.
In the south.
Sava, one more time, Sava.
You could just do what the Palmarian Catholic Church do and just say, "Oh, I have an apparition, and now I'm going to elect my own pope."
Yeah. Well, that makes a little bit more sense than just claiming that there's no priesthood. That's like set of a conscience all believer, priestless set of a conscience all believers now. That's what we're dealing with. That's how the situation has devolved. But that's sort of people going to this insane logical conclusion of papism, where the center of Christian life is turned into like this one figure.
Yeah. All
right. And you have either people who convinced they got to stay with him, which leads to Bergoglio insanity. Right. They begin losing their minds.
Yeah.
They can't accept that as being in any fundamental reality.
Right.
So they do whatever. They become. Frankly, they lose their minds. In fact, I remember, Father Joseph, when we had our letter to traditionalist Roman Catholics back in 2012, which I don't know what happened. We had some people contact us, like reply to the mass. We sent out a mass email.
Nice.
Sort of. So a lot of them didn't reply.
Yeah.
So there was one guy who replied, and after we tried to reply back to him. He was like, "You got to join. You got to accept this and this." And eventually, after two or three replies, he sort of said, "Don't contact me anymore because I'll become an atheist if you convince me the Pope's not that we don't need a Pope."
Good grief!
I was like, "This is demonic insanity."
Prelate.
Talk about prelate. That it's almost like there was a gentleman, the Roman Catholic gentleman, who was running a website called 1 Peter 5, who simply had a nervous breakdown.
That guy, yeah.
I don't know what happened to him. Somebody else.
I tried to reach out to him, but he technically, I think, is still kind of a nominal.
I'm not trying to attack him personally.
I don't. I mean, he deserves it, frankly. So, but
I mean, you got people in this situation where their whole lives are suddenly turned upside down and destroyed because they have to defend a completely indefensible position.
Yeah,
and that's simply not historically or theologically, canonically, can never be defended. And this is it.
I had a man who I was trying to help in my hometown in Canada. Thought I, introduced Orthodoxy to him, but then he lost his mind when he found out I was a former Catholic priest, and he started stalking me and showing up at my place and calling. And I said, in a blizzard, I said, "You cannot do this."
But he was ill.
Yes, he was ill. But all the same, completely, brainwashed in saying, "You don't have the Pope, you don't have anything."
I wanted to get James Reader John's question, but he kind of dropped off. If you're still here, Reader John, please call back, because
you can at least send the question in if he doesn't want to talk. What
was the question? Do you have a record?
No, I saw he was trying to speak, but then I guess he dropped off. And
we didn't mean to cut him off. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's fine. Atomic Lead said that's Steve Skojak. I have great sympathy for him. Yes, it is Steve Skojak, although he said some things that kind of have earned some of the shooting on him. Refined Canine says, "I've been tempted towards Jansenism lately. I wonder if the seat of Peter has been vacant since 1644. I'd offer it's been vacant about 600 more years than that."
Why would he be tempted to Jansenism in preference to Calvinism?
I mean,
well,
that's
all of our listeners are Orthodox. So,
Yeah.
RC
That is true,
charismatics
Vasily.
are.
That is true, Vasily.
what is the question? What is the statement?
He's
Oh, he says
charismatic.
RC charismatics are demonized so much that's why they'd rather go to hell than be without their idol. Okay, and Wazda says, I do have a question. What is the question? You can pop on or you can ask the question in the chat. It's up to you. Okay. So I wanted to get to the second.
Okay, go ahead.
You have other topics, Father.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, the topic. There was we had requests for a video review, and so it was the Zealot Jungle one, the Father Peter Hears one, and so I haven't watched it, so I was going to live review it. Let me see here. There's more questions though. How would you explain to someone who hasn't been Orthodox very long the difference between knowledge of God in the mind versus knowledge of God in the heart? Well, it's a totally different thing. I mean, it's a different experience completely. Knowledge of God in the mind.
Well, remember the demons. Saint James says the demons know God exists and they tremble.
Yes.
I mean, for in the perspective of the demons know that Orthodoxy is the truth. They don't have saving faith, nor can they. All right. So you can have, like Saint Maximus the Confessor was he who said something like theology without charity or experience is theology of demons, because you can know the truth intellectually, but you're not part of the church, you don't not in any way connect. Even if you're formally a part of the church, you don't go to sacraments, you don't have any living experience with it.
Right.
Reader John.
What was your question?
Did you have a question, Reader John?
Forgive me, I'm recovering my voice from a recent illness.
That's okay. You sound fine.
And before I start, one of the Vladikas bless, please.
Bless.
Well, bless. Oh, God bless.
And I was thinking that most of the true Orthodox, or most of the Carpatho-Russians, came to true Orthodoxy because I think most of them avoided the OCA and the Ecumenical Patriarch. A lot of them, I thought, went through ROKOR when they were still their own entity.
Yeah, that's just part. The half of Jordanville was Carpatho-Russian.
Yes, and there were parishes in Pennsylvania. Wilkes-Barre, for example, was a parish that was.
Well, that was St. Alexis Parish, in fact.
Was it?
Yeah, well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we had a mission down there. I know because I went there and I conducted the choir when Father Luke at the time brought me down to help them out, and they were Russians, and they absolutely were true Orthodox at the time,
and really very fervent.
Absolutely, and fervent. And
which parish was this?
Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Right. That's why I asked, because I know the Wilkes-Barre area pretty well. I was just
what is the name of it? Do you recall the name?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And historically, I think some OCA, or some that started out in the OCA when they started doing the calendar transition, to put it nicely, in the 1980s, went over to ROKOR for that reason specifically.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
I mean, that's another area where people, as soon as the calendar change happened, people may say, well, abstractly, why is this a big deal?
Right.
But the Orthodox mentality is this something doesn't seem right. Why are we doing this when we've always used this church calendar since Nicaea,
right,
and before?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. I mean, there's sort of this. You're right, because sometimes people can if you just go off unthinkingness, you can always make all kinds of mistakes. But the church calendar is a humongous issue, and people forget that was a big issue back in the 1590s, 80s.
Right.
It's not like this has been. I'm sorry, it's not like it's been an issue since 1920.
Do
Do you remember Danny?
And then the 100.
Yes, I do.
I think he came to ROKOR because of the calendar.
Maybe. I don't recall.
And married a born cradle ROKOR.
Oh, is he the reader?
Yeah,
Yes, I remember him.
What was her name?
Yeah,
lovely woman.
Lovely woman, yeah. So very pious, very nice couple. And he was very gung-ho, but she she cooled him down.
Yeah, she's very stable. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where they ended up after 2007.
Sorry, did we cut you off, Reader John?
Oh no, you're fine. I can continue. You guys have it's hierarchy here, so
There was
See, we'll just keep talking among ourselves.
there was a
without real-
lot. There was a lot of So I had, of course, I had met so many people. Of course, being in my position as guest master at Jordanville, and years later, when I returned from Asia, I met some of them in the Rochester parish, the True Orthodox Rochester parish in Rochester, and they. And I asked the priest, who actually was a summer boy when I was there in the 80s, and they were so upset with what was going on. And there was this 2-year sort of a flux. People were so confused and didn't know what to do. They felt absolutely betrayed. And a lady I met that I knew me from Jordanville said they were so relieved to hear because they didn't know what happened to me. And they said, "Oh my gosh, you didn't end up with Moscow. You're true Orthodox." I said, "Yes, absolutely." And they said, "They lied to us. They promised they weren't going to leave, and they lied to us." And her husband's like, calm down. It's a long time ago. But yeah, they were very upset. And incidentally, Sava, I learned because I knew Father Flor quite well, and I had no idea that he refused to acknowledge the union. And my question is, I don't know if there's an answer to it, is what were the logistics of that? Did he just stop serving? Did he not commemorate the Patriarch Alexei, or did he?
I can answer that.
Oh, please.
They stopped some even to their death. I can think of a proto-presbyter specifically that even after the union, they did not commemorate the patriarch.
Okay, but they were still in ROKOR, communing in ROKOR and everything, right?
Correct, yes.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
But how does that work when Father Flor is serving in the church and Vladika Loris is on the cleros and he's not commemorating Vladika Loris?
Well, they probably had a fight and talked in Rusin after.
You're asking me to apply logic to an illogical situation.
From what I understand, I'm still having trouble picking out voices. I don't know if that was Barnabas, Vladika. I don't know who asked that.
Oh, that was
Barnabas. That was Barnabas and Vladika Lazer talking. That's
yes.
Yeah, I'm having trouble picking up voices because I can only hear out of one ear, so I don't know who's who yet.
all right. If we're going to have to announce who we are,
identify ourselves.
we're going to have to identify ourselves before we speak.
We'll do another round of identifications. My name is Father Joseph. We all know me.
I don't know who asked the question. That's all. But from what I was heard is that Father Flores just didn't come out of his cell after the union, after the Anschluss.
Oh, wow.
Oh, how sad! How sad!
Yeah,
because again, what they felt absolutely betrayed. And as by the way,
they felt deceived.
Deceived, yeah, they felt deceived because they hadn't.
Sorry, that was Barnabas, and this is Liturgical.
Okay, Liturgical Lazer speaking now. They never mind.
Well, at that time, you got to remember, Metropolitan Loris was when the union happened, he was issuing canonical releases left and right for those people that felt betrayed.
Oh, was he?
So they were trying to avoid a fight as much as possible, I guess. At least some of them were.
I don't know the mindset.
Yes, the young priest at in the Rochester True Orthodox parish. I said to him, I was gone. I left in '97. Happened 10 years later, and I said, please, and said there were a lot of meetings in the Synod building in Manhattan, and there were serious screaming matches on both sides. It was extremely passionate. And again, those who were pro Moscow the whole time were thought, oh, we finally got our chance. We were going to show everybody. And of course, those who were opposed to it were again extremely upset and felt deceived, and that they were not only deceived at the moment, but deceived up the years leading up to it.
Well, how many? My understanding is except for Bishop Agafengel in Odessa, who's technically part of the ROKOR Synod in 2007 or 6, all of the and Bishop Daniel, who said he said he disagreed with it,
Right.
but he couldn't do. It was like he couldn't do anything about it because they were going to kick him out of his house.
And he was so sick, and
he's in a wheelchair.
elderly. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
But he died like right before the union, or
no,
right
he
after?
died. He died.
No.
He lived through like a year after or something like that.
Yeah.
But all of them, I think, eventually went along with it because look who like so Archbishop Anthony of Los Angeles had passed away in the 1990s. Obviously, there was no Bishop Constantine Asinsky; he was gone. Who else? I mean, I guess a lot
of people remember also had left in the run up to the 2000s. Right, you have the bishops who left for ROAC, the Free Russian bishops. Bishop Gregory Grabe went with them. And so then you have like when Metropolitan Vitali was house arrested and then got out. He took.
What's the story behind Vitali's escape from Synod headquarters?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned. Huh? Oh, I mentioned
that's a good one.
Yeah, basically what happened was
explaining a historical account, so it's important people know what happened.
Yeah, the 2001 Sabor that the ROKOR had was after the 2000 Sabor of the Moscow Patriarchate, where they started to selectively recognize new martyrs, etc. And a lot of people in ROKOR wanted to open up a dialogue. And what ended up happening was that Metropolitan Vitali was so disgusted that he ended up submitting his resignation. But what he didn't realize was he thought that was he was kind of doing a power play and that they'd be like, no, don't do this. But instead they were like, oh, good. And so like then he unresigned. He was like, I take that back because he realized what was happening.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, we'll just lock you in the Synod building. And so that's what happened. And then basically, and then basically when Bishop Metropolitan Valentine was actually vacationing.
Father Joseph.
Barnabas speaking.
Who had the ability to lock Metropolitan Vitali in anywhere?
Well, I believe, if I would assume that they did this because they had the keys. I have no idea.
Did he speak English?
Of course he spoke. He spoke English.
Okay,
but the simple reality is, I remember this happening live, because
wasn't there video evidence?
Well, no, there was video evidence of them dragging Metropolitan Vitali into a car once he got home, so that they could have him mentally examined. But no, video was just really new at that time. But the point is that
so would that be Ludmila?
Ludmila actually is the one who called Metropolitan Valentine, and he was vacationing over at Father Vladimir Shishkov's house, who was commemorating Metropolitan Valentine in New Jersey. And they drove over to the Synod, and somehow Ludmila was there. She got him out, and they got him in the car, and they drove him up to Canada to his house.
Mansonville, right?
Mansonville. Yeah, Manson.
Mm-hmm. Well, who owned by the way, this is Bishop Enoch. I'm just wondering, did the ROKOR Synod own the Mansonville complex?
No.
Who owned the Mansonville complex?
I presume it was owned by the parishioners there in Metropolitan Vitali.
Okay. There wasn't any legal battle over it then, I guess.
No, they didn't. Right. There was no legal battle over Mansonville, but what did happen was a few days later, they basically got
the police showed up.
The police and some people, but they physically put Metropolitan Vitali by force in a car to have him undergo a mental examination.
Right.
And so then he passed with flying colors and explained he wanted to go home. So they let him go home. And that was the last of that. And then the denunciations began. By then, people had already begun organizing under Metropolitan Vitali. Bishop Varnava signed on, and then we all know that how that story went. But then they made more bishops. So that was the ROKOR V. So you have to realize that piecemeal opposition to the union that would have been there, say, in 1995 was largely gone, except at the parochial level by 2007. And
Father.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Reader John.
Yes.
Where does the Indiana list figure in? You know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. The Indiana list was run by Father Mark Gilstrap, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure, but I could have sworn that. Let me double check before I say anything. But Father Mark Gilstrap ran the Indiana list, and that was one of the larger email lists. Another one was that was the largest, and then I think the next one would be probably that.
Are you trying to see his current affiliations?
No, I'm trying to see if he's alive. He passed
Yeah,
on in
no. Yeah, he
2017.
passed, yeah.
So I didn't want to say God rest his soul, and he's alive, and I get a message from him like, why did you say I was dead? And so let me see here, and then. Let me see here. I was telling Sava an hour before the stream that ROKOR began to crumble after St. Philaret's repose. Well, that's not wrong. I mean, remember that the Hacknessism occurred a year later. None who helped Metropolitan Vitali made all that mess. She was KGB. I don't know. I can't.
And you start seeing bullying on these bulletin boards, as it were.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I was there for some of that. I didn't say much on the Indiana list. I was part of it, but on the Orthodox Tradition Yahoo group, I said a lot more. And so there was a lot, and that was one of the primary means of communication back then. Yeah. So people use those lists to organize, so on and so forth. I would say that was kind of the first wave. Not even that would probably be the beginning of the third wave of people moving into true Orthodoxy. And I got to be part of that, and it was terrifying. But in any case, that was
here's a hypothetical question. This is Bishop Enoch. Since we're just talking about the history of it.
Yeah.
Assuming, let's say, everything from 86, the Hackness stuff, schism, to 2006, where Agafengel left.
Lord bless, Father.
Let's assume none of those people left. If they all stayed in the ROKOR, there still would have been no hierarchical support for them. I'm assuming they didn't really have.
Well, you'd be talking about all the Russian bishops that they made would be still with them, and all.
My point is that this is this theory. Could they have prevented it if they had not left, or is it the writing already on the wall? I guess is the question.
I would put it like this. I would say this. Most likely they would have been hierarchically outnumbered. However, they would have had sufficient numbers as a single unified group that it could have substantially changed the direction of the ROKOR.
But that's assuming also that they could have provided a unified front, since this is the argument that ROKOR always was sort of a umbrella traditionalist group. It had multiple different factions in it. And as history progressed with ecumenism and modernism, various different reactions and answers to it, nobody could form a coherent message other than sort of generic, we're traditionalist against this, but without going into
splintered.
Pardon me?
It splintered after St. Philaret.
Yes,
exactly. And it's important to remember also that when you're dealing with the people like who really kind of ran stuff in the Union, like Archbishop Marco Berlin, these people were not only skilled diplomats, but sometimes they could be quite cutthroat.
And they were KGB agents.
Yeah. And so that's unfortunately, not only that, but they were getting help from KGB agents. So the point is,
Anthony of Geneva.
He was now Archbishop Anthony of Geneva was actually kind of like liberal through and through for years. I mean, there are complaints from St. Philaret in his letters about him,
which is interesting considering the fact, this is Bishop Enoch, that Archbishop Anthony was the chief consecrator for Metropolitan Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
And he supported establishing him there.
It made no sense. That's
what I think it was. I think Archbishop Anthony, from what I've read, he had this he didn't like communism, and he was like a monarchist, and he was quote unquote traditional, but he was like, let's have some bishops in Russia. It wasn't like he had an ideological reason not to have them, I suppose.
It's very possible, and again, I'm speculating here, that his ecumenism was driven partially by embarrassment. And what I mean by that is that while he was willing to start a holy war over the Russian land, if the Constantinople parishes started calling him a schismatic, he would get hurt feelings from that or something.
What's the timing of the Western European archdiocese, the whole Evlogi?
The Paris Exarchate?
Yeah.
He was known for, Anthony of Geneva was known for concelebrating with new calendarists. So
Yeah.
even when the ROKOR said something like the new calendar is wrong, the next week Anthony of Geneva would go and celebrate with like the new calendarist hierarchy, and
Did you ever hear the
Yeah.
instance where when ROKOR was technically in commune with the Matthewites, he invited the Matthewites at the same time he invited like some Greek new calendars?
I would not be surprised. I've heard of that though.
He's like, here, let's invite all these, like, and it was gonna, and like when they all showed up, an explosion sort of happened.
So you all are seeing the mixed messages too. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's obvious why though. In that case, it was a way of getting rid of the Matthewites, and it worked.
But it also could be he just honestly, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say honestly. Maybe some of these guys were so naive, and their thinking. I don't know. Maybe that's
a lot of them were.
Yeah,
or because of the geopolitics, they might have just been go along to get along too.
Yeah, maybe they thought, well, we don't like people, so we just, I know we don't. But I've encountered that with some like ROKOR, MP ROKOR people, where they sort of think, when I've encountered a few of them, that the whole reason you don't want to be part of the big church, the official church, is you're angry about something, and it's just some personal issue about everything.
Yeah,
that sort of. Remember after the infamous situation where Father Pantaleimon back in 2012 admitted that he had abused all these people, and
but he said it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. He admitted, it was like, it's not.
I did some bad stuff, but it wasn't that bad.
I met him in '86 and with Vlad Handera. Sorry, Bishop Lazer talking here. So I met him, and he, my friend, asked him. Said, "Oh, it's so terrible, all these rumors." And Father Pantaleimon said, "Yes, it's so sad, but the righteous have always been persecuted."
Oh, how?
Yes. So my goodness.
But my point is, this is Bishop Enoch speaking. So after he admits all this, and there was the big scandal in Hacknam, but like everybody knew what was happening, but now they couldn't hide anything.
Right.
But Bishop Jerome of the Moscow Patriarch at ROKOR wrote this letter to all the Hacknam clergy. Saying,
this was when he was Father John Shaw.
Well, he was. Well, no, wasn't he? He was Bishop Jerome by 2012, I think, wasn't he?
Oh, I thought you were talking about 1986. Okay,
no. And he was saying, well, now that Father Pantaleimon has admitted he did this, you can all come back and join ROKOR. No hard feelings. It was sort of. It was sort of like it almost like some of these individuals. I think that's how, because remember, unfortunately, then Father Jerome Shaw. Had been since at least the 90s promoted some sort of union approach with Moscow Patriarchate. And I think, again, their idea is, well, these are just emotional issues, and, these can all be papered over without really going into any of the theology, because their view is almost sort of that theology is a front for some sort of political motivation. And it's a very worldly way of looking at things, and it's a very superficial way of looking at things. I'm sure you can find some people who get angry and upset and just do something, go into some schism or whatever, simply over that. Okay, fine, but you cannot explain large numbers of people who have studied church history, have lived through these events, and have come to realize that these are unacceptable situations simply because we're dissatisfied.
And one thing to remember is that even though there was a lot of support based around HTM, some would even, say it was like cult-like, these people still had their individual lives. They had their individual parishes. In many cases, they just thought it was a case of an innocent man being persecuted.
Well, yeah, in the very case that, and just real quick, I'm sorry, but this is Bishop Enoch, in the very case that after the whole thing got exposed in 2011 or 12 for sure, most of Hacknam simply left Hacknam.
Yeah, and they all went to the GOC. They went to the GOC Ecumenicals or the GOC Macarius, which is precisely my point. Their confession of faith wasn't, otherwise they would have just gone with Father John.
Yeah, if these people were simply whatever Pantaleimon says, then they would have just said, well, I guess we just accept him, no matter what.
Right. And the overwhelming majority of people didn't do that.
Yeah. That was close to the time Bishop Jerome was forcibly retired because of the whole debacle in the ROKOR Western Rite too.
This is Barnabas. Father Joseph, does this make any sense to you? And I don't know if all of it's true, but I heard in answer to people with strong objections to the capitulation, people asked Mr. Luke Muryanka what he thought about following the church into whatever. And he said, I personally disagree with it, but I'm simply too old to go and find my own place now. Why weren't there any repercussions for that? Because I heard
you're talking about the current. You're talking about the
current abbot of Jordanville,
Bishop Blue. Okay, yeah.
Not Bishop, but Mr. Muryanka.
I'm not a fan of
squinty eye Sava. So, like, why was there no backlash to it? Because I heard 3 or 4 people repeating it.
Well, probably because they figured if he couldn't do anything about it, really, then it wasn't too much of a worry. But he has been supportive of some of these fighting from within protests, but really he's not going to do much at all, and they know that.
So they're just not worried because he has no real power.
Correct.
Okay.
This is Bishop Lazer speaking. What was the topic regarding concerning Father Peter Heers?
Well, we were going to review a video.
Well, video.
We were going to. Well, that's the thing. I'm wondering if I have to ask something. I'll be right back. You guys keep talking for just a moment, okay?
Yeah.
Yes, but the idea of, well, I don't agree with it, but I'm still going to go along with it. I mean but to go back to the Unia question, the same thing happened in the 1590s. You had a lot of priests around Kiev and others, like, they don't agree with Metropolitan so-and-so signing the Unia, but they're not going to, but what can I do? I have no place to go. I have my church. Yeah. Whereas the patristic answer has never been that. And that was, if you read St. Hilary Portiers wrote a short work called Against Auxentius, who was the Arian bishop of Milan. And he points out, and he says, once faithful people realize the subterfuge behind the words of the heretics who have taken control of the church institutions, they have an obligation at that point to openly resist it and to not go to these services. And he says that it would be better to go to caves, attics, basements, anywhere else than to these places, because even then people were saying, well, they control the church buildings.
Right.
So, and they call themselves the Orthodox Church, so isn't that sufficient? And the patristic answer was always, no, it's not sufficient. And yes.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure, because I know the movie review will take the video review will take a little bit of time. So yeah, I can go over, because usually I try to end by 11, but apparently we're gonna go over time.
Okay,
go ahead.
Oh, but we're going right to the video?
Yeah.
All right. Once again, I've never seen this video, so I have no idea what's about to happen.
How long is it, by the way?
It's 34 minutes.
Okay. Oh, that's a long time.
Okay. Well, we met.
Oh, and I can speed it up to 1.5, so it'd be like roughly 20 minutes.
All right. Well,
because he talks pretty slow.
Everyone can stay up if they want, or they can go to bed.
I'm kind of good with it, and we can all throw in our opinions.
All right.
One moment. Hold on.
I have to head out here in a second, so I'll just give my closing remarks. Thank you for having me on, Father Joseph. Very nice to speak with you, Liturgical Lazer. I'd love to visit the monastery. I'll make sure I call ahead.
Of course, but yeah, it is in the Great White North. It's kind of far away, so.
So I need to go to Canada sometime soon, anyway. So I might do that. And again, I'll make sure I call ahead. I'll make sure as well with Enoch, I call ahead when I come back to the average.
We'll get the mops out.
Yes. Yeah. So
thank you for calling in, Sava, and you have a great rest of your night. And this part of the video review is probably going to be a separate video when I clip it out later on. But I want to get as many people commenting and with their thoughts as possible. So give me just a moment while I put it on the screen. And somebody did point this out, and it's a very good question. We don't either. But no, I'm going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to do it at 1.5, so it'll only be like 20 minutes.
Okay.
All right. So let me set the setting.
Point.
What is
playback speed?
So sympathetic to Father Peter Heers.
I have no idea.
When his opinions are problematic.
Well, yeah. Well, we can definitely touch on that. I think so. All right, so we're gonna share the screen. I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna full screen it. And
There it is. Zealot Jungle.
It's an excerpt from Russia's New Martyrs in the Catacomb Church.
well, it's actually an excerpt from the
This is the book we're quoting from. You see that here? Let's see if we can get that. Letters from Father Seraphim. Anybody know about this? I don't even know if it's in print anymore. I hope it is. If you don't have it, it's worth every dime. One of the best books. It adds so much that's not in the life. There's a lot in the life that's there. I mean, but there's actually some really wonderful material here that I don't think is in the life of Father Seraphim. So let's read this together. I'm going to comment on it as we go, and then we're going to run to your questions. Right? Hopefully, anybody who's out there saying, well, "I want to get to my questions," we'll get there in a minute.
us too.
This is an issue. He's dealing here with an issue that is going on right now in our Orthodox survival course, and some people have written me and said, I'm really thinking about going to the old calendars. So I thought I would bring this up. This was extremely helpful for me in the day back in the 1990s. Let's see, when was it? I started Divine Ascent. That was 97. No. 97. I came back from Mount Athos and I started Divine Ascent, the Journal of Orthodox Faith. And I was traveling in different places in 96, 97. I actually went to Boston, the monastery. He refers to it in his quote, Boston Orthodoxy. That's Holy Transfiguration Monastery. I visited and actually met with Father Pantaleimon, who's referenced here in this letter. Didn't know much then, but it was a very interesting visit for me. I remember I was going to him presenting what I was going to do with Divine Ascent, which was all going to be about, the saints and the elders and everything. And I had a advertisement there that I created. And on the advertisement, I had different elders from our day, including, I think, Elder Joseph, Elder Sophrony, some others. And he was extremely forthcoming and strident with me to tell me, no, Sophrony was deluded. He was an ecumenist. I forget who else did he reject. Elder Joseph didn't reject us.
Oh, by the way,
that was his elder.
Oh,
but of course, he was.
The issue with Father Sophrony Sakharov, I can tell you for a fact that there is, in the Moscow Patriarchate itself, there is massive opposition to the Fanar's canonization of him. Because he, for example, composed whole new liturgical prayers to be said during liturgy. He taught things like universal salvation. Everybody will be saved in the end. I mean, I can point, if you really wanted to, I could send you links to like Moscow Patriarchate, commission of, theology experts saying things that Sophrony.
Vladika, wasn't he one of the rehabilitate origin type?
I can't quite hear you. There's a dog barking in the background somewhere.
I'm sorry about the dog. Okay.
All right. Isn't he one of the original rehabilitate origin type?
Yeah. Now he did translate, or someone around him did translate the letters of Elder Father Saint Silouan. But the problem is this: when someone says they were a disciple, I oftentimes wonder when someone says they were a disciple of Saint Silouan.
Yeah.
Do they mean they like with 15 other people stayed in the cell or served him for like 6 weeks, or what was their real relationship? It's sort of like Father Pantaleimon, we're going to talk, apparently he's going to talk about him, saying that he was a disciple of Elder Joseph the Hazakas when the story is that
he lived there for like 3 months or something.
And then he got kicked out.
Yeah.
He's like, no, because if Father Peter here is going to talk about, and what he's going to quote the letter from Father Seraphim Rose about Boston Orthodox. He really means pre-Hockner HTM. Well, a lot of people who are true Orthodox have problems with HTM, and that you cannot portray, the anti-ecumenism zealot position as simply everything's HTM.
Right, because HTM was very unique
in
a lot of things, which we'll go over. But yeah, we'll continue.
Yes. But this seems like what it's going to be. It's going to be trying.
I feel like that's what I'm feeling it too. All right, one moment.
Okay, let's go.
Disagree with Elder Ephraim's position. So Father Pantaleimon was kind of the father of a lot of the zealotry in the church today. They also do wonderful things. It's not all bad. I never agree with this tendency of people to have to create demons or to demonize or to everything's bad, everything's good. No, there's a spectrum and there's a lot of good things, and I'm very appreciative. And I use the books from Holy Transfiguration Monastery and all the rest. But having said that, their ecclesiological position was problematic. There were wonderful things and aspects about it, and that's why they had a very powerful witness. Today they're far diminished because the monastery split and many of the monks left. Turns out later that there were ethical issues and they found out about those, and many of them left. I think partly because of that, but also because of some other theological issues. Anyway, it's off topic, but I want to give you some background here. Father Seraphim's talking about the Holy Transfiguration Monastery, which was in the Church abroad in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. They left in 85. They created their own jurisdiction, basically, in America, which is tragic.
86.
And they joined the Gregorian calendars for a time, but then they have their own HOKNA, Holy Orthodox Church of North America. But their work and their witness in many ways was very powerful and very convincing. But there's a problem, and Father Seraphim absolutely nails it. And it was so helpful to me, and hopefully it'll be helpful for those who are tempted now with the easy solution of let's go and jump and let's go to the old calendars. All right, that's the easy, quick solution.
Okay. First off, I don't know if I'm going to. I hate when people say that it's the easy solution. The easy solution is going to the closest church near your house, even if they're ecumenists. That's the easy solution. I cannot possibly understand when we're talking about people who have traveled countries to get baptized and received. We're talking about people who have sacrificed everything, including their lives. When we talk about the martyrs, that's not the easy solution.
That a lot of people. All right, let's read Father Seraphim's book. It's fantastic. I absolutely love Father Seraphim in this analysis. It's absolutely amazing, and it's beautiful, and it's Orthodox to the core. So here's the royal path, folks. Let's listen. 1976, just on the third day of Pentecost. The events and revelations of recent months and there's going to be some typos, forgive me because it's the last minute, have driven us to some sober thoughts, in particular about the future. In reading the new Boston epistle to Metropolitan Anthony Bloom, which is of course mostly correct as usual, but wrong in tone, keep that. Only one thought stands out, : this is a rehearsal for a very similar epistle to our own bishops. So he's saying, look, Metropolitan Anthony Bloom was, I think at that time already, I think had been a bishop of the Moscow Patriarchate, right? So the church abroad is obviously not in communion with the Moscow Patriarchate because of Sergianism. We're going to talk about that in our class next. In two weeks, there's a break in communion because of the subjugation and the identification of the church and the Soviet powers. And so 1970s, Bloom is a part of the Moscow Patriarchate and church abroad is not. And so the Boston Monastery, which actually is pretty young, I think it was like 10 years old at the time, but very bold, and they write an open epistle, it looks like, I never saw it personally, to the Metropolitan. And Father Seraphim, having gotten to know pretty well this group of Orthodox, now these are Greeks for the most part who've left the Greek Archdiocese, joined ROKOR because of the Athenagoras and all the apostate things that were going on in the 60s. And they're very zealous, and again, offering a lot of wonderful things. And he says, but only one thing comes to mind. They're going to turn eventually and write to our bishops and have the same stance, which was prophetic, because exactly 10 years later, less than 10 years later, in 1985, I think, Panteleimon and the monastery and those who are kind of in his sphere of influence end up getting up and protesting that ROKOR is essentially selling out. I mean, they're recognizing. I don't remember exactly the theological.
I feel constrained to once again point out that the dating on this, especially that night, he keeps saying 1985. 1985 was the year that Metropolitan St. Philaret died. The point is,
then he died in 1986.
It was the 1986 Nativity epistle that became the occasion for HOKNA's departure.
Right.
So I feel like that's kind of being lost there with the wrong year. But what's more important, that's kind of, it still leaves out of context the reason why Boston joined ROKOR to begin with, which was the lifting of the anathemas in 1965 by Athenagoras. So, this is kind of being forgotten in this, and I realized that Father Seraphim was seeing something in the Boston monastery in terms of how they were acting and how Father Panteleimon was acting, but I don't know if he's coming at it from the same angle as Father Peter. And that's all I had to say. If anyone else wants to jump in.
Well, and Father Peter's talking about it a decade removed from when they first left, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's already a lot of revelations at that point, I believe, about HOKNA.
Well, the point is I know that they officially wanted to put the canonical trial on Father Panteleimon in 1986, and that people will flatly say, that was kind of what kind of pushed everyone, because from their perspective, they think they saw themselves even as a kind of parachurch within ROKOR. I've actually heard people that in HOKNA that said that.
Well, and Father Joseph, and here's the greater question for me: why is he treating all old calendars as a monolith? And why did he go to Father Peter? And why did he go to HOKNA specifically?
I think so. First off, one thing I will say is this: Father Peter knew a lot more, and I only discovered this maybe like a few days ago. And I was kind of horrified. Father Peter knew, like, for example, went to conferences that were held by the Synod and Resistance, and spoke there. He knew other groups in True Orthodoxy, and I'm sure he knew about other groups in True Orthodoxy in America. I have no doubt at this point, he knew about Metropolitan Pavlos and Petros of Astoria. So I think that for him to make it all Boston Orthodoxy is really unfair. And I find that,
well, you know why,
Deacon Nectarius's book is actually a decent corrective to that.
Yeah. Well, in Father Peter, he quotes Father John Romanides a lot too.
Yeah, but in that he's not going to mention Hockner because Hockner agrees with him.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. That's probably why you want.
Greek modernists who talk too much, work too little. Father Sheriff from Rose had his focus dealing with them. Very possible Father Peter will be due to victim of idle talk of those. One thing I'll never say is that HTM weren't good workers. They are always busy. I lived at the monastery for like 2 months. They're always busy. Everyone gets an obedience, something to do. If you don't have a job, you will be kept busy.
That was my favorite Psalter, so I can't complain.
Yeah, it is a wonderful Psalter. I've noticed that ever since they lost all the parishes to the GOC, now I guess they're selling bread locally. That was an interesting thing. Yeah. But anyway, okay, that's getting too off the topic. One moment.
Argumentation, but I think it was something like they're recognizing grace, or they're recognizing the various local churches, and which are involved in ecumenism and surgeonism, and they break away and they basically go to the Greek calendars and eventually to their own jurisdictions. I said, so he was very prophetic, Father Sheriff. I thought that was just amazing, and he's already seen this 10 years beforehand, and that's exactly what happened. They feel themselves so strong and sassy now that it is obviously only a matter of time before they weary of the incorrectness and inconsistency of our bishops in not breaking off communion formally with all the local Orthodox churches. Many people have this wrong impression that ROKOR broke off communion with all the local Orthodox churches. They became totally schismatic. They pretty much didn't have any difference between the contemporary Old Calendars schismatic groups. It's not true. And Father Seraphim says they've never formally done that. There was never a synodical decision to do that. Even if they were helping the Old Calendarists, there was different things going on. They were friendly and all the rest, and there was even communion to a certain degree with some. They hadn't broken off communion with the local churches. In fact, the Serbian church and the church in Jerusalem, they were very much still connected to in terms of relations. So some of you maybe are not in trouble in terms of the temptation on the right that we're talking.
Okay, I do want to address this here because he must know the history a little bit better than this, as I've mentioned before, and so he would have known that, for example, there were true Orthodox that were commemorating at Jerusalem. I find it odd that he's kind of just saying the whole thing that we just broke communion with everybody when that's not really what happened.
Kind of minimalist. He doesn't even talk about Patriarch Diodorus.
Yeah, he does, and nor about the confusion in Serbia, the Free Serbian Church.
Correct.
There's just a lot. It's ultimately, even with, like, just yesterday, Antioch and Jerusalem reunited after a 10-year schism. But the point is, these things affect us. We don't. There's no true Orthodox of Antioch or Alexandria yet. Alexandria, there's definitely some in the area.
This is Bishop Enoch. This is sort of this would be sort of like saying, well, in 1098 or 99, the Crusaders took control of Antioch, and they communed with Patriarch John Oxyantes for about 6 months, because Antioch hadn't formally severed communion with all the they had already broken with the Pope, but with whoever was claiming the Pope, but not necessarily with all individual, Western clergy or whatever. And therefore, that means you have to, not oppose communion with the papacy or something like that. It's a very strange line of argument. By the way, Patriarch John Oxyantes, eventually the Crusaders started persecuting him, wanting him to commemorate the Pope, and he had fled and he was imprisoned, and then he had to flee to Constantinople. And there was no patriarch in Antioch, literally living in Antioch for 100 years almost after that.
Well, in the modernist Greek jurisdictions, I always hear 1204 is like because of the sack of Constantinople.
Yeah, but that's almost acting like it was all just simple. Look,
It's like covering your eyes and pretending.
Well, that's even worse. I think one advantage that gives the ecumenists by moving it to 1204 is that they can then throw in any Latin practices that showed up until by 1204.
They just want to govern Francis of Assisi, huh?
Yeah.
And the Rosary.
Goodness.
All right. Okay, let's continue.
Talking about tonight. And so you're going to be like, well, this is kind of boring. But stick with me. It's really important. It shows us the royal path, right? Father Seraphim is going to teach us the stance we need to have to stay on the royal path. And if you're not tempted today, probably the devil will tempt you soon enough with the idea that, look, the bishops are all sold out. There's nothing left. It's Orthodox. We need to jump ship. This is how the devil works. He creates. He's done this for 1,000 years. If you followed our Father Seraphim Rose survival course lectures in the fall, you'll remember that the pendulum swing is what is the way the devil works, right? He took the Western schismatic heretical groups and from one extreme to another, he kept them going until there was nothing left. Everything was divided up. There were thousands of pieces of Protestant. That's what he wants to do, of course, and that's what he's trying to do in the 20th century with the Orthodox Church. There's very weighty issues, of course, we're dealing with here in Orthodoxy. So I don't want to give the impression that, it doesn't. It's something totally similar to what happened in the West. I'm talking about the methodology of the enemy, how he works.
Protestantism.
And
come again?
No,
I
no.
thought someone had a question. I was.
Is Father Peter going to read the? Are we listening to his commentary on the letter for the video? Or?
He's adding commentary to the letter. Yeah,
he did an Orthodox. He did an Orthodox survival course.
Father Seraphim did.
Oh well, yeah, I knew about that, but it sounds like Father Peter
Father Peter might be trying to redo it or something like that. That's. But in any case, the point is what I'm not a big fan of is, again, now he's claiming, the people who think like that all of the bishops of world Orthodoxy have fallen is a satanic temptation. I mean, who created that temptation by signing all the agreements with the WCC? Was that done by Satan or was that done by these bishops?
This is Bishop Enoch. He said all the bishops. Well, the fact is, all the bishops did not fall. I mean, they're like where some of us are here. So it wasn't like he's already creating the assumption that you have to submit to the institutions controlled by modernist ecumenists.
Exactly.
And if you don't recognize them, then you're not part of the church. So the heretics ultimately who have control,
they're the standard of Orthodoxy.
Exactly. That's this subtext of his thought. And he can't escape that for some reason.
And so that's what we need to focus on. It's different particulars in every age, but the methodology is similar. Doubtless, they are already furious with us for revealing to the world in our new Orthodox word that we have not broken with them. All right. So, Father Seraphim said in our latest edition of the Orthodox word, we're telling the world that actually, don't be confused. We have not broken communion with the local churches. He's saying this is 1976. Zealotry is definitely in the air now. It has become the fashion in the English-speaking wing of our church, and the more moderate position of our bishops will now come to seem intolerable to those who think, quote, logically, unquote, all of which raises questions for us. Where do we stand now? Where do we go from here? I want you to notice how close Father Seraphim was to the path of the local church, how involved he was, how he had pain of heart over the whole mission to the English-speaking Orthodox in 1976, and the whole status of the church abroad, and all the issues that were going on. He was up in the mountains in his cell, and yet he was in pain of heart over the whole church. That's, I believe, personally, that's how a saint should feel and does feel. Saint Paisios was like this. If you've read his life or you've read his writings, he was an ascetic in his cell, and yet he was at one in heart and mind and soul, feeling and.
Come again?
Here comes the Paisidoxy.
It was almost unavoidable, and it's of course now we have to.
And the reason Father Paisius of Athos is promoted is he was the one who said Bartholomew is the greatest patriarch ever, and you cannot break with him
or something like that.
I mean, there's some of the reasons some of these elders, Alphanite elders, were canonized because this question: if Father Paisius of Athos was this ultra-conservative against ecumenism, against modernism, as Father Peter and others say, why would he have such a comfy relationship with Bartholomew, who is the ultra-liberal? And why would these ultra-liberals who control the Fanor promote the Paisiite cult of devotion at every single chance? Well, it's because Paisi basically said, you can't leave Bartholomew. God sent him, and he's going to believe that he's the leader of Orthodoxy. So
he's the Pope of Orthodoxy.
Is that why he goes to an Ephraimite monastery in Arizona then? Because they have the same.
Yeah, definitely.
Father Peter does. Is that why they have the same mentality?
Yeah, exactly. Elder, it wasn't like Elder Ephraim didn't know better. He knew better, but he just
there was you can actually there was on Metropolitan Demetrius's channel, he actually talks about
why didn't Elder Ephraim ever once publicly have a statement condemn. I mean, you can find Athonite elders that are even they're technically part of the quote unquote official church in Athos who will like condemn Patriarch Bartholomew, and but they don't have. I mean, obviously they're not making everything to the right conclusion.
Well,
my point is that these are people who like live in some hovel, so they're not afraid of losing anything. I mean, they may be, you can claim they're inconsistent or whatever, but in the case of Father Ephraim, he had nice monasteries. He's going to lose that.
Well, if you talk to the monks at the monastery, though, they know they shouldn't be in communion with the Patriarch of Constantinople, but they think they're covered by the prayers of their elder.
Well, I don't know if anyone has
unquote.
seen this. I mean, it may have been passed over at a certain moment, but there was a letter that was written by Elder Ephraim that was right before. And I'm just going to go through this real fast, and I hate interrupting the thing for this, but right before he re-entered into communion with Constantinople, he had actually joined the ROKOR. And when he did join the ROKOR, he actually made a statement. And that's why everything became so bizarre that he would suddenly go back to Constantinople because, well, frankly, we suspect he was threatened. But I'm just going to read this because this is actually Elder Ephraim talking, and before Constantinople got a hold of him. And this is what he said. And it's on the Orthodox info site. It's a pretty old article. That's why I remember it. But the introduction is, in a bizarre series of events last year, 1991, the abbot of the monastery of Philotheo on Mount Athos, Archimandrite Ephraim, left the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, joined the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, and then subsequently returned to the jurisdiction of Constantinople. While there are conflicting reports about his reasons for doing this, and while his actions have confused and disappointed a number of people, Father Ephraim's sojourn in the Roka has left us with a very interesting statement about that church. Forced to confront polemical and hostile voices from Greek New Calendarists when he joined the Russian Church abroad, Father Ephraim wrote a short note on the validity of the church. Since the bishops of the Russian Church abroad consecrated bishops for us old calendarists, because this obviously came from Etna, when our last hierarch in Greece reposed, his comments about the validity of their church are of special importance to us, even more so since they come from an adherent of the Ecumenical Patriarchate who was compelled by unusual circumstances to speak objectively and truthfully about the Roka. Such objectivity and truthfulness are rare commodities indeed among the modernists who have so compromised themselves by political self-interest and the demands of the ecumenical movement. We have translated Father Ephraim's comments from the Greek original text, which was distributed by Father Ephraim last year in the United States. And basically, I mean, he goes, I'm going to just put the link because I don't want to interrupt this too much in the chat, and I will put it in the description. But basically, he talks about how there's virtually no canonicity in any part of the world, and that's except for the Roka at the time. So this is part of the reason why it was so jarring. So you have to keep this in mind. He was on the verge of joining with the GOC in Greece, actually, as well. He had already made those steps, and something Constantinople called. They said something. And all of a sudden, now people are like, he had a vision. Yeah, he had a vision of a phone call. That's what he had. All right, so let me get back to Father Peter here. Sorry to interrupt. Did anyone have any comments before I started?
No.
I'm just saying he's a disciple of Elder Joseph who had the same visions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Keep going.
All right, let's get back to Father Peter.
Over the situation of the whole church. And his writings reveal that. His writings reveal one who's not indifferent or not far from the brothers and sisters around the world. Excuse me. This is very important, this stance that he has. And it's not hard. It's not easy to maintain, believe me. It's not easy to maintain. There's tension continually. You're in it. You're crucified daily because you have the need to withdraw. You have the need for your prayers, for your inner life. And if you do not feed that, if you trample upon that, if you become only externalized, well, you're going to destroy yourself, and you're going to be worthless. On the other hand, if you become indifferent or cold or just an escapist from reality, and you don't care about the world, I don't think that's ultimately the fruit of holiness. I mean, there are certainly saints who did that for a time, but you'll see in the lives of the saints again and again. The Lord will come, or the bishop will come, or the elder will come and say, "It's time for you to open your door," or it's, depending on the kind of reclusion or seclusion they had. Or you'll see that the time, a historical moment came when all of that work on themselves then became fruitful for the sake of the church, and the church used it, and their holiness was not kept under a bushel. Now, obviously, that depends on the person and the time, and everything's different. But it's an interesting phenomenon you see in the lives of the saints. So you cannot be remote from the church, not the world. Not that we're becoming involved in worldliness. You can't be remote from the body and blood, the body of Christ and your fellow Christians in their struggle, and not have pain of heart. That's just not a characteristic of the saints. We cannot follow in the line, it goes on, we cannot follow in the line of, quote, Boston Orthodoxy, unquote, which is actually a kind of reformed orthodoxy that happens to be mostly correct, is actually outside the tradition of orthodoxy. I bet they can't stand this letter in Boston. But the truth of things is, there's a really perceptive critique going on right here. This is a creation of human logic. Now, you might say, I don't really know what he's talking about because I'm not familiar with Boston Orthodoxy or the zealot on the right problem in the church. And frankly, I think Father Seraphim has critics who call him on the right, right? The people, very humanists and others who say Father Seraphim was a fanatic. Father Seraphim was on the right. So it's interesting where you are, right? Where you are in this spectrum is going to determine how you view Father Seraphim. Maybe the Boston folks think they're in the middle and there's somebody on their right as well. I don't know. But and people think I'm a fanatic as well. Actually, I was talking to I was corresponding with a monk in one of the monasteries in America, and he wrote me and said, thank you so much for your offerings. And then he goes, oh, and by the way, a lot of people think you're a fanatic. That's okay. Well, I think that's where you need to be. You need to be. It's probably a good sign, and when not all people speak well of you, and you got people on both sides, right and left, telling you there's something wrong with you. That's probably where you need to be. That's what Father Seraphim was, and is to this day. There are people on both extremes. Although the people on the right tend to claim him as their own, even though I don't know what they do with this letter. So let's keep going.
I can tell you what they do with this letter. In the first place, it's kind of a misrepresentation of what the true Orthodox churches and even the movements looked like at the time. To focus solely on Boston and then kind of to make it, it's funny because, again, we mentioned this earlier, but Boston was, and I'm actually looking for the letter of Father Seraphim now because I noticed that this is like a cut and pasted note. Father Seraphim was involved in a number of the controversies that separated the renovationists, the right-wing renovationists at the time, like the evolution question, like the Romanides questions, what was the toll houses. And so he was in the middle of stuff
St.
like
Augustine.
Yeah,
St.
you read a whole
Augustine.
book about St. Augustine. What is that? Yeah.
And so all this is being kind of quietly ignored, even though Father Seraphim had real reasons for why he criticized Boston. So to simply imply it was because they weren't in communion with the rest of the church, that's a misnomer. That I don't think that's what happened. But remember that one of his last letters, he specifically tells someone, he's very clear. He says, we are only in communion with the true Orthodox of Greece, and the true Orthodox, and I don't know if he mentions Jerusalem or Serbia, but the point is, he's very clear that he does not think the entire church should be, that they need to be in communion with the entire church. So I feel like this is a misrepresentation.
I agree. And the funny thing is, if he knows about Greek Orthodoxy, I mean, he claims to be an Athonite. He has Athonite spirituality, which I didn't know was a thing, a term. But would he not know about the struggle?
Yeah, we got to do
how would he not know that?
Father Joseph, well, we have to go. We have to go to church. Okay.
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 All right. So
it was nice talking to you.
Okay. Thank you. Likewise, Benedicite.
Yes.
Thank you, Vladikas. Thank you, Benedicite. All right. So let's continue the video and let's see what else we gotta see here.
Going. It's a terrible temptation for our times. This should be for our times. Most of the converts will probably be drawn into it. And this is, in fact, the great temptation of a lot of the converts, because they come into Orthodoxy looking for the ideal, right? That's what draws them. A lot of people read themselves into Orthodoxy, and then they come in and they say, where's the ideal? I want the ideal. I want the total 100%, no compromise. Everything is perfect. Where is that? And I have to be there. Otherwise, something's wrong. In fact, so they overcompensate. They go to the other extreme. Listen to what Father Seraphim is going to say about this. We fear that all our articles about zealotry in the past years have helped to produce a monster. So that's an interesting thing. He did produce a lot of material on ecumenism and all the rest. I personally think that he compensated for that for sure. If you see all his life, there's no question about that. If put in the right context, I think all of that can be understood properly. But when you have a lot of people who don't have the basis to properly judge, don't have the discernment, then there is the possibility they're going to get it wrong. They're going to make a mess of it, and they're going to go to the extreme. So it's always a temptation. And so we have to constantly come back again and again and make sure that we're on the royal path and not go to the extreme. For the future, we will have to emphasize the feel of orthodoxy, without which zealotry is empty and even harmful. And he did that actually quite a bit toward the end of his life, the last 5-6 years of his life. Without which zealotry is empty and even harmful. All right, so there's that aspect. The right wing of orthodoxy here, he's referring to not only Father Pantaleimon and his followers in Boston, but some of the Greek calendarists as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually true. If anything, he might be referring to the Matthewites, but I do want to see one thing.
He did say something right. Context is essential.
Yeah,
but the proper context is essential.
Let me see here. Okay, let me see here. I am checking just to make sure. Okay, so he basically he left out the PS, and apparently, I guess they were talking to an Andrew Bond, and I guess he's trying to console him for the Boston encyclical he received.
I think
and so ironically, that PPS is interesting because he actually says, he says one would like to be friendly with the zealots also, hoping that they will not fall into a party line. We're not fanatically against the rebaptism of those who insist on it in case the bishop approves, but this should not be allowed to set a fanatical tone to orthodoxy, which is what shocked Andrew. So that is interesting in and of itself. But let's continue on, and we'll see what else he has to say on this.
Well, he's not just referring to the Boston group. There's other groups of the Greek councils. They had, as we said, they've arrived at saying there's no grace in the Church of Greece and all the rest before a synod, before a council, right? And
they literally held a council to say that.
That's probably the greatest error of the old counters, is that they did not follow the patristic methodology of how to counter heresy. And so they not only did they endanger their own salvation by going to the right and creating schisms, but they didn't help the church to solve the problem.
So wait a second. So everybody that went to sleep one night that was on the old calendar, that was not in heresy. And then we have a state church that evolves over several years that changes the calendar, and even the first archbishop of that new structure wrote a paper previous to him becoming the archbishop talking about how if they change the calendar it would form a schism.
Go into schism. Yep.
Okay, I'm just talking crazy over here.
No, trust me, you're making sense. It's just that I find it hilarious that it's just there have been so many condemnations now that have been done by different councils of true Orthodox. At this point, to say, well, no council condemned it. Well, no council, no council. The Ecumenists recognized. Yeah.
Father Peter is very intelligent, man.
Well, yeah.
Come on. Well, he researches and researches. Surely he would have come across it.
Yeah, the idea that he doesn't know is I honestly, up until this week when I found out about the Synod and Resistance thing, I honestly really just thought he was, kind of just a nice, humble guy that
it feels cherry-picked now, doesn't it?
What?
It feels cherry-picked now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
All right.
And the problem of heresy and delusion only is solved with great sacrifice, usually martyrdom, confessors, and exile and all the rest. That's the lot of those Orthodox saints and Christians who are charged with countering the distortion of heresy in every age.
Wait! I want to hear a repeat of that. What happens to the real confessors? Hold on. Let's just say it again. Say it again.
And the problem of heresy and delusion only is solved with great sacrifice, usually martyrdom, confessors, and exile and all the rest. That's
okay. I want to just keep that clip. I'm going to make that's the most valuable clip he said.
Wait. Martyrdom, confessor,
exile.
So who got their beard shaved off, imprisoned, killed, martyred,
exiled,
yeah. Locked in the monastery? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thrown down.
I'm talking crazy again.
I know.
That's the lot of those Orthodox saints and Christians who are charged with countering the distortion of heresy in every age. It ends up being that they're exiled by St. Maximus the Confessor and all the rest. So I lost my place here. Let's see.
You just threw Maximus and the Confessor there just for it.
The right wing of Orthodoxy will probably be divided into many small jurisdictions in the future. Most of them anathematizing, and fighting with the others. Again, prophetic. Again, prophetic. That's exactly what we see. In fact,
And look, they're still anathematizing and fighting with the others, even without talking about ecumenism. Okay.
We're just
the
talking
true TOC groups, true Orthodox Christians of Russia, have suffered the same
Now he's using quotes.
fate. Now you have groups in Serbia that broke communion with the Russians, and the Serbians don't have communion with the other Russians, and then they answer, as one did in the comments in one of my videos, that doesn't matter. It's not important if you're in communion with one another. What's important is you're in communion with God. But that's the sign of being in communion with God. That's the sign of being in the church. The vertical and the horizontal are the cross, right? You can't have a cross without a vertical and a horizontal plane. Talk about communion with other right believing Orthodox Christians. Those things are anathema to God. And yet now they end up justifying these divisions as, it doesn't matter. It's the end times. Let's justify everything, right?
And again, he glosses over the fact that the overwhelming majority of true Orthodox Christians on earth are actually in communion with other true Orthodox Christians all over the world. It's just...
Did he record this before 2018?
No, he didn't.
Okay. So he didn't bring up Constantinople, Moscow, Alexandria.
The whole thing. It's just,
Okay, never mind. I'm just crazy.
That's what it ends up being. It's very problematic. And this is very prophetic of Father Zealot. If only our Russian church abroad can stay whole and on a sound path, not inclining to the left as a reaction against the zealot wing, it will be enough for us. Now that's a point of contention today. After the union with the Moscow Patriarchate, you see people commenting and wanting me to jump in and get into the debate, right? There's people who are just baiting that I get into this debate and talk about it.
Now, this is an interesting thing because the royal path, which is what he was talking about, what Father Seraphim said here is, if only our Russian church abroad can stay whole and on a sound path, not inclining to the left as a reaction against the zealot wing. In other words, staying as Orthodox as they not joining the Moscow Patriarchate.
Maybe he was talking about the whole deal between the Matthewites and the Florinites as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the church abroad did actually break communion with everyone in 78 or 77 because of this.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Context.
Take a side and
yeah,
and I know they're waiting at the wings, at the door, or at the passageway to get me as we enter into the question of surgeonism in 2 weeks. So he's saying, if we just stay whole and on the sound path is the royal path, what I'm talking about tonight. Stay on the royal path, not inclining to the left as a reaction to the zealot wing on the right. And this is exactly what the devil wants to do always. Create one and go to the other and go to the other and go back and forth and lose all balance and lose all sense and just fall apart. Become 1,000 pieces like the Protestants. We've got to resist this. And the way we resist this is patient.
Wait, okay. So now, obviously, the way, because it's so divided right now, and literally churches at war and throwing, we see what's happening in, the country which cannot be named. But somebody said, don't connect the Orthodox life of the persecuted Orthodox Church in Greece with the martyrs, confessors, and those in exile, because you'll become a fanatical, scary Donatist calendar schismatic. Yeah, this is crazy.
What is Donatism again?
It's Donatism to you. Remember, it's Donatism.
Donatus, yes.
Donuts,
right.
yeah. Donut stuff. Donuts.
Something about donuts. Yeah.
Does Father Peter have any patristic backing for fighting from within? Not anymore. And so let me see here. Really bad from now on. I can only imagine, but I've never heard it, so we're gonna find out.
If you want to hear a good counter to the fighting from within, I know this is not part of your synod, but I guess now Bishop Maxim, he was Father Maxim at the time, talking about conservative modernist. Was it conservative modernist new calendars? I think it was called.
I'm not sure which Bishop Maxim that is, but I'd be willing
from
to read
GOCK.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. He's written a lot of good. You're talking Bishop Maximus of in South America, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, he's written a lot about that stuff. He wrote one of the True Orthodox or Truly Orthodox, which was one of his best essays. But anyway, give me a second.
Endurance in suffering and confession of faith and trusting God and hope, and not allowing the tempter to bring us to despair, to bring us to confusion, to want external easy fixes, and not.
Hold on. Wait, the tempter brings us to despair, which means it's the deprivation of hope. It's the demon of the deprivation of hope. How are you supposed to stay in a situation that is wrong? If you're with heretics and you hear people preaching heretics, isn't the way to despair to say that there's no way out and you're stuck? I mean,
Right.
to me, that seems even more a temptation to despair than anything else. But okay, I don't know.
I'll send him some books from John Cassian. Okay.
To jump and not to run into conclusions, to not trust ourselves. Oh yeah, we figured it all out. I've read what they have to say in this jurisdiction. They're perfectly correct. I totally agree with your jurisdiction. Their conclusions. I'm running over there now. They are the true Orthodox.
That's what Canon 15 of the First Second Synod says to do. But anyway,
It's all trust in oneself. We're gonna figure it all out. We know. Instead of submitting ourselves to contemporary living tradition and holy fathers. Now, some people want to say, well, in order to do that, you've got to figure out where the true holy fathers are. The saints in our day are clear. We don't have. It's not like we're in darkness. We have their writings. We have their witness.
notice how he slipped in there contemporary holy fathers. You know, it's always got to be the contemporary. You don't want to go to the rudder, and you don't want to go in.
But
Yeah,
that's the drum that he beats. That's his shtick.
I honestly, I didn't watch much of him before. I just assumed he, as I said, I made a lot of assumptions, and I thought I didn't think it was like this kind of pernicious. But anyway,
Who are their disciples? Where do we? That's who we need to follow, and that's who we need to become. And this is exactly what Father Seraphim is going to talk about as well, even in this letter. We must keep up the living contact with the older Russian clergy, even if some of them may seem to us a little too liberal. I thought that was very interesting. Because people have this idea, ROKOR, I did years ago. ROKOR is just like monolithic one. Everybody's a zealot. Everybody's, super zealous for the services. Not true. There's a whole variety of people in every jurisdiction. This whole idea that people want to create one jurisdiction as the super jurisdiction, the right jurisdiction, it's all nonsense. In every jurisdiction, there's strugglers from all aspects of the spectrum. There's people who are worldly. There's people who are ascetics. There's bishops in jurisdictions which seem to be in America, because America is a unique situation. Really not the same in some of the old country churches. They're in a jurisdiction which seems, when you go to some of these parishes, very, very liberal, very secular, and you have bishops that are the exception. So that's a very interesting.
who are these? Okay, this is interesting, because I mean, the simple reality is, a liberal of the 1970s would not be a liberal of the 2000s. So it would just not be the same experience. The idea that, I, for one, have a lot of respect for many of the true Orthodox bishops that I've known over the years. Even when I may disagree with them on a particular stance, but the idea is just that there's no living tradition is weird to me. It's like, is he really implying that the true Orthodox have no living tradition?
Well, notice, okay, for a guy who's really into the Greeks, notice he never uses the word, how do you pronounce it? Homologia. Homology.
Yeah, okay.
Homo, confession of the same faith as the fathers. Right.
The oneness of faith. And he's talking about there's liberals, there's conservatives. You know what he doesn't mention? He doesn't mention heretics. Like, are they? You can just have heretics in the church. They're fine too, because ultimately, as we all know, especially now, considering his current circumstances, most of the bishops don't like him. So
here's the thing: he keeps saying jurisdiction. There's no jurisdictions in Orthodoxy. Yeah. There's the confession of faith that lines up with the faith of the fathers.
Yeah, and then of course we have to use contemporary fathers. We can't use the rudder. Can't use any of the old traditions.
Oh, you can't say canons. That's no. Well, he does.
Which
he
is
says
funny, because the very introduction of the rudder says it's for lay people, and it blows my mind that they don't. Yeah, I know. Well, I might just do a short just with that. Just put the page from the Patriarch's blessing on it, because clearly, obviously, people are not realizing that this stuff is happening.
So what you're telling me is you're going to have a shorts with that page.
Yeah, just to put that page up. The rudder is for everybody, guys. It's for everybody.
No voiceover, just the title. Just the page.
Maybe I'll just say it like that. The rudder is for everybody, guys. And then the short's like 15 seconds, so they have to keep watching it.
No, just leave it. As long as you can leave a short, like 10 minutes, just leave it.
Oh, no, a short has to be 60 seconds. But anyway.
Okay.
All right, we continue.
Interesting comment. Even if some of them seem a little too liberal, we need to have contact with the older Russian clergy. Talk about the convert group of Orthodox in the 1970s in the Russian Church abroad. Otherwise, we'll become lost in the zealot jungle, which is growing up around us. So perceptive. He's Orthodox about 12 years at this point, right? And he's lived in most of those years in a little shack in the mountains. And yet he has such discernment here.
Got that Zealot jungle fever.
The Zealot jungle. That sounds. People sent this to me months ago, and I just thought it was so goofy. I was like, I'm not gonna. Is this with the Zealot jungle? But
Zealot is not a bad word.
Yeah, but
Zealot is not a bad word. Oh my goodness.
It's just ridiculous. Okay, but then okay, it sounds.
That's exactly what
Zealot jungle. Okay, one more. Okay.
I mean, most zealots would say, "What's wrong with the zealot jungle? Why not? We're all true Orthodox in this zealot jungle. Everything's great. It's paradise.
We love the zealot jungle."
This is very Darwinian.
There's the ethos of Orthodoxy that's missing. People, this is why I named our website Orthodox Ethos. And that's what's missing. That's what's missing among so many of.
Maybe I should change my website to Notes from the Jungle. You know what I mean?
That's from the underground jungle.
The underground jungle. It's like we're Godzilla lists. Okay.
That's why the bishops should stay.
In America, we're missing the Orthodox ethos. I think I said in one of my talks once. I was talking to a zealot, in a good sense, a very zealous young Orthodox convert in one of my talks. This was like 8 years ago, and he was just saying all the right things, and yet I felt like I was talking to a Protestant. It was a weird experience. I'd been in Greece now at that point like 15 years. I hadn't come back that often. Met a lot of people, and I was giving a lecture tour at St. Paisios. And I was a very lovely person. I didn't have any wonderful conversation, but the whole way struck me because I probably wouldn't have noticed it 15 years before. But having lived in Greece, been around people who monks and monathos and everything, it struck me. It just jumped off it. Like this is strange. The way of Orthodoxy has to be acquired. It's one of the hardest parts of being an Orthodox Christian. So the zealot jungle is a nightmare. If that's all we have at the end of the day is a bunch of headstrong, rationalistic, super correct, but totally lacking in Orthodox ethos and nobility, spiritual nobility. Well, it's like a Protestant Orthodox. I don't know what to call that. It's weird.
Okay, so I'm at a loss for words for the level of misrepresentation we're talking.
Why doesn't he just call it zeal without knowledge jungle? Because you're not really talking about zealots.
Yeah, he's really more focused on the jungle. And by the way, it's not where Godzilla.
He's talking about those dirty converts, which he just happens to be one.
Yeah, exactly. So does Father Seraphim. It's amazing that Father Seraphim figured all this out after 12 years of living in a shack. I mean, I've been Orthodox 15 years and I didn't figure this out. I was okay. But anyway,
it's like a monster. No, we need to be following even those who we think are not zealous enough for us, who are parish clergy, don't have the ascetic life that we think they need to have, and all the rest. But they carry within them the Orthodox ethos, the Orthodox way, the Orthodox philology.
They carry the Orthodox ethos.
No. Aren't we supposed to look for bishops that have reached theoria?
Oh, we're not supposed to actually look. We're not supposed to look for bishops. We're supposed to look for priests. First off, I'm starting to get that impression. They don't worry about the bishops, Oh wow.
Goodness.
Okay. The humility, the sense, the perception, the discernment that goes along with a long experience of 1,000 years in Russia, 2,000 in Greece, right? That all is built up and passed on generation after generation, and they grow up with it. They're fed on it as children, whereas we're coming to it as adults, and we're carrying all of our baggage. Those of us who come to the church as adults. All right, going on.
Okay.
He admitted it. Come on.
I've heard this before. Oh, it's the crazy convert disease. And it's like, oh no, you don't understand.
He included himself. He said he
included himself, but here's the problem. He mentions you need the historical experience of 1,000 years in Russia and 2,000 years in Greece.
No, he said you need to move to Greece. That's what I heard.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if you move to Greece or Russia, you'll see the situation there is far more dire, but the point is...
You'll see a lot more secular.
Yeah. I thought the funniest thing, the story, I still want to find that interview, but apparently it was the former chief ecumenist in Moscow, the Hilarion of Volokhomansk, and he was talking in an interview, and...
Budapest.
What? Yeah, now he's Budapest, but he actually had this interview on Russian TV where he was like, yeah, it was very interesting. When I got there, I asked my driver to take me to the Archbishop's residence of Athens. And the driver's like, oh, you don't want to go to that guy. And he starts pointing him towards Caniggo Street.
It's funny you should mention that because I have the same experience.
All right.
Yeah, they most of the taxi driver, even the young guys, like they go to the other islands to find spirituality, I guess.
Yeah.
And when you talk about Athens or anything of the Archbishop, you get them cussing and spitting. They're like, they say there's so much corruption in the church there and all
Oh,
this.
yeah, of course.
And then you see the clergy, and they look like they just drive up to the little cathedrals there, and you can't tell them from a layman until they put their cassock on. It's crazy.
Yeah, by the way, I love the comments. The more theological ones and the more humorous ones that are popping up. But let's see if we can survive 8 more minutes of this and see if we can finish it off.
I don't want to take too long. We have questions. First of all, of course, our instructors must be the giants of that older generation. Vladika John, Averki, and those like him. Vladika Nektari, who is the most precious of that generation remaining to us. May God preserve him yet for many years. So, of course, Vladika means despota, or in Greek, or master, means it's referring to the bishops. Talking about St. John of Shanghai, San Francisco, Bishop Averki of Jordanville, who was still alive at the time. I think he reclosed right about that time. And Nektari, who was a disciple in his earlier days of an Optina elder, Nectarios, and he was close to St. John, and he was the bishop that would come and visit them in San Francisco. So these are the giants he talked about. And when I wrote my introduction to Father Seraphim Rose's life in Greek, I put in there that Father Seraphim was like, he had great, tremendous vision, not only of himself, but because he was standing on the shoulders of giants, and he could see even further because of their ascetic struggle and their depth of orthodoxy. He was elevated, and you see, he was elevated because he was humble before them, and he went with all his heart, soul, and mind to be their disciples and follow them. Right? That's how you get elevated. You humble yourself, and you'll be exalted. And Father Seraphim exemplified that. We who wish to remain in the true tradition of orthodoxy will.
Wait, who is now? Here's my question, because then who's the instructors of Father Peter's generation? When we talk about Vladika John, St. John of Shanghai, Archbishop Averki,
yeah, who's the Metropolitan right there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Where does the? I mean, it seems to me like his stance is based on, we talk about these elders, but the giants were with us. I mean, most of his stuff he talks about the new martyrs; those are with our Russians, not. Moscow didn't even recognize them as anything but schismatics until 2000.
I think he's still learning about ROKOR because technically he was under Metropolitan Seraphim of Piraeus for a long time.
Yeah, the great luminary who demanded the COVID shot or you're excommunicated, and all the other crazy stuff.
I'm a little confused where he's getting his history from. I think I know where he's getting it from, but I'm gonna be nice.
We'll have to be zealous and firm in our orthodoxy without being fanatics. So yes, zealous, absolutely. Firm, absolutely. Confessing the faith without being fanatics. See the distinction there? So there's zealotry not according to knowledge, which is fanaticism, which is not seen in the lives of the saints. People, because of our climate today, which the left always is throwing the mud of zealotry, fanaticism, extremism, people in this react to this and say, well, even the idea that you could be a fanatic, is that really true? Or is that just something created by the left? It is true. It is true. And it's a caricature that they do on the left, and people who are far from fanaticism, but there is a fanaticism.
Huh. What an interesting thought. So, like, most of the traditionalists are caricatured by the left as fanatics? Huh.
Are we talking about distinctions without a difference?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I feel like I should be
we're the fanatics, but he's not the fanatics.
Fanatics for 200.
Doesn't mean that it doesn't.
One moment.
Exist, and it's a lack of discernment. St. Paul calls it zeal not according to knowledge. It exists, and we have to be cognizant of it. And the way you become cognizant of it, one of the ways, if you don't have contact with holy people like Father Seraphim had, is you read the lives of the saints, you devour the lives of the saints, you live on the lives of the saints. And the first of all, the saints that come immediately before us. We've talked about this many times, but if you're not doing that, if you don't have it at the side of your bed or on your breakfast table, the life of St. Paisios or St. Joseph or St. Jacobus or whoever it is that you want to read, or the various
every modern elder you can find. Except for Elder Joseph, because that's unfair to him. But that's okay. They rewrote his life, so.
Martyrs, whatever it is, you don't have that. Well, you're missing. You're wasting time, precious, valuable time. Along with the scriptures, you need to have the lives of the saints.
There was I hate to bring this up because, he mentions having the lives of all these modern elders. It was no less than, the holy what is his name? I have it right there. Saint Nikolai Velimirovich of Zija, who did the prologue of Ohrid. You can literally read a life of a saint every day. There's enough space for it, and magically the prologue. But magically, this book is useless. You need to read the latest elder because that's tradition.
Well, he pushes the Synaxarion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that nobody that the 12-volume Synaxarion that very few
nobody
people
can afford.
Yep. Oh, that's clever. The whole purpose of Saint Nikolai shrinking the prologue down was to make it accessible. But yeah, so you skip that. You either get the Synaxarion or Elder Paisios, who blesses Bartholomew, whatever.
And then you're going to avoid the various pitfalls on the right and the left. Without being fanatics and without presuming to teach our bishops what they should do. I thought that was very instructive. We have that temptation today.
How the shoe fits now.
Aren't we in a tub of hot water right now?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, now who would be presuming to teach bishops in that sneaky manner and all that stuff? It's funny, but I can see now why people wanted me to review this.
We're having
the bishops, unfortunately, who are falling away, apparently, or not doing well. They're not doing well. We need to help pray for them.
Yes,
I understand that, but
we completely get it. You're not doing well. Got it. Well, that's mean. I'm sorry. He's doing well.
We should pray for him. Okay.
We should pray for him. I want him to be. He knows us all apparently, so he should join us. But anyway,
having said that, you can't do that. You can't go and become smarter than all the people above you. Now, there are bishops who are confessing the faith. Let's follow them in terms of the content of the teaching and the discernment that they're giving us and how to deal with all these contemporary issues. People like Metropolitan, the Orthodox of Morphu, and Longin of the Ukraine, or Seraphim of Kythera in Greece, or any number of other bishops in America that maybe I'm not familiar with.
Wasn't Metropolitan Longin silenced?
Yep.
And who was the other one he made? Neophytus of Morphu is like, I guess he's like the last great hope. I notice a lot of people are.
He's too busy having visions.
What?
He's too busy having visions and
he has visions. Oh no.
Yep. Keep going.
Oh boy. Here we go. All right. Well, we got 4 minutes. Let's finish this up.
Some of the Serbian bishops, I think, are standing tall in this whole COVID insanity. Above all, we must strive to preserve the true fragrance of orthodoxy, being at least a little not of this world, detached from all the cares and politics, even of the church, nourishing ourselves in the otherworldly food the church gives us in such abundance. Elder Makarios, he's talking about St. Makarios of Optina. Elder Makarios well says in a letter, quote, fanaticism limits a man's way of thinking, but true faith gives him freedom. This freedom is revealed by the firmness of a man in all possible cases of happiness and unhappiness. So he's saying no matter what comes to the man, if he is free in Christ, he will be firm, whether he's tempted on the right, tempted on the left, whether he's given all kinds of praise and he has a temptation of ease and comfort and praise, or whether he's under tremendous pressure. The freedom in Christ, which doesn't come through fanaticism, right? So fanaticism, zealotry not according to knowledge, getting basically a rationalistic approach to correct.
I still want to deal with the question of heresy. I noticed that hasn't come up like at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like he that doesn't seem to be an issue. It's just fanaticism.
Isn't it interesting? He quotes an Optina elder. Didn't they also write a book called "Living Without Hypocrisy"? Okay, continue.
Being super correct, being right in everything, but not having the feeling of orthodoxy, the heart of orthodoxy, the ethos of orthodoxy. That doesn't bring true freedom spiritually. It's a temptation that is not going to bring people to true freedom in Christ, because it has pride. It has pride within it. That freedom is the sign of our orthodoxy, Father Seraphim Rose. That is precisely why the Josephites, now we haven't got there yet, but we're going to get there in 2 weeks. Metropolitan Joseph of St. Petersburg was the first.
It's Saint Joseph of Petrograd. Every true Orthodox Christian calls him Saint Joseph of Petrograd.
And if he was part of ROKOR at the time, he would have known that.
Yeah. But he wasn't, and so, that's, and what it, oh, wow.
All right, keep going. I was there.
To cease communion with Sergius after the declaration of 1927. And so we're going to learn about that, but this is who he's referring to. Metropolitan Joseph, those who followed him, the Orthodox, in other words, they were Orthodox, and they were rejecting the innovation and the betrayal of Metropolitan Sergius. And
they were rejecting Metropolitan Sergius. They rejected Patriarch Sergius. They rejected the people who followed Patriarch Sergius.
Not the betrayal of Metropolitan Sergius himself. Come on.
Wow.
No,
Just
mixing
wow.
words there. Come on, buddy.
Yeah. Hold on. Let's finish this.
He says that is precisely why the Josephites separated from Sergius in 1927. Not for incorrect ecclesiology or violation of canons, but because he deprived the church of the most precious thing to her internal freedom. Internal freedom.
Yeah. It was actually for the things he mentioned. It wasn't just all about the freedom. It was because of the canonical anomalies, the whole serving an atheist government that wants to kill you.
That's how you got a whole heresy named after him. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Sergianism.
Oh shoot! I lost my spot. Oh no! Hold on.
That's all right.
I might have to hear this again. Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to avoid that.
Metropolitan Joseph of St. Petersburg was the first to cease commemoration, cease communion with Sergius after the declaration of 1927. And so we're going to learn about that, but this is who he's referring to. Metropolitan Joseph, those who followed him, the Orthodox, in other words, they were Orthodox, and they were rejecting the innovation and the betrayal of Metropolitan Sergius. And he says that is precisely why the Josephites separated from Sergius in 1927. Not for incorrect ecclesiology or violation of canons, but because he deprived the church of the most precious thing to her internal freedom. Her internal freedom. What? Let's see, that's a typo as well. But to see this, it should be, but to see this, one must have the savor, not the savior, the savor, the field, it's the savor, S-A-V-O-R. This was typed up very quickly, forgive me. The savor of Orthodoxy. Let us not lose it, all right? So to see this, to even see that we're losing the freedom, our internal freedom, right? We have to have the savor of Orthodoxy. So let us not lose it.
Well, just in case anyone wants to see the full letter and any of the other letters of Father Seraphim, they are online. I'm going to include a link, and I will include a link at the closing. When I redo the description on the video, you can see all of Father Seraphim's letters, and that
unredacted.
Yeah, and so without spelling errors too, apparently. So wow. All right. Well, that's done. Okay. Well, we are now at the 3-hour mark, and I haven't seen a show that's been 3 hours for quite a while. So I will say one last thing, which I will separate out because it's going to be a thing I'm going to just separate. I would like to thank everybody who has been assisting financially and through prayer for our channel and for our work and for our website. Thanks to your collective generosity, I should be able to continue, and I'm going to start continuing most likely Wednesday or Thursday. I should be able to do this full time until January of 2024. I am, humbled by the response that I have received. I am immensely thankful to God, and I'm immensely thankful to each of you. And I want to just say thank you again. These past few months have gone in ways I never expected. I didn't think any of it was possible, and there have been many days where I have just alternated between asking God for help and God giving me help, whether through people or personally on prayer, and I have been more humbled than you could possibly imagine. I don't even know how to express it, but thank you for telling me that this needs to be my job for a while. And so I'm going to make use of it, and I'm going to, God willing, I'm going to make the best use of it I can, because we got to spread the gospel. We got to spread the truth. And again, thank you. I see your comment, Reverend Bruce. I don't want to put it up because honestly, I have to thank you guys, all of you. Thank you for showing support. Keep showing support. Obviously, we want to keep this going longer, but we want to see just how much we can do. I firmly believe that we're at a pivotal time, and we need to, sometimes there was an expression, the mouse heard round the world, and I think that's about to be us. So we're going to find out. with that, I am going to close out the show. Reader John, thank you for being on for this review. And so I want to thank everyone who was here. I see. Oh, Father Boniface is here. Oh, hey there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Father.
Oh, okay. Oh, I was just going to make the comment that if in my case, if I was in my journey to look for the faith and I ended up with the autonomous Orthodox Metropolitan. But in the meantime, a couple years back, an Orthodox candidate priest died here in Lakeland, Florida, and I had met. I wasn't familiar with everybody, but I think I met one of the chief, the patriarch of ROKOR and the patriarch of the Carpatho-Russian church at the funeral, and I spoke with him.
Okay.
I spoke with him a little bit, and I said, "Well, I'll give you a call." And I waited a year, and then I went to the Carpatho-Russian church and thought I'd take a look at him. So I called the bishop, the Metropolitan, up again, and he refused to return my calls. So I think those guys sniffed me out, and I wasn't their kind of guy. So the question is for Peter Heers would be, if you are already exhibiting the convictions that have any kind of weight to them, they're not going to open the door for you to come into their house. And so
that. Wow.
And that would be their seminary. That would be their seminaries. That would be their priesthood. That would be so I really don't see Peter addressing that issue because they're going to vet you out. That at least was my experience. And so I don't see him giving any kind of an answer for a situation like that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, it's a salient point, Father, and honestly, up until a couple of days ago, one I never would have even entertained. You know, we have to pray for his soul, but
I would say that's been true since you guys remember the Nathan Monk incident?
I had heard of him. I don't. Isn't he like he's a YouTuber who like does like Celtic stuff or something?
I don't know what he does now, but at the time he snuck into ROKOR and then had a very short-lived stint in ROKOR. And then after that, things they started cracking down on who came in a lot more. I think that was around 2013.
I just wonder how long. You know, Peter is walking a tightrope right now, and I'm wondering if they're going to just nudge him out, whether graciously or push him out. But he's going to have to chew, I think, a lot of his comments. I think he's trying to straddle the fence because he doesn't want to, let's say, engage a real ascetic life and do some suffering.
Father Boniface, he's already been publicly rejected by ROKOR. Publicly.
So, yeah, right. So he's already like being nudged. And so he's still trying to maybe court them. But I think reality is going to come down and it's going to slap him in the face. And so where's he going to be, after that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, on that somber note, thank you, Father, and thank you, Reader John, for being here. I also wanted to thank Sava. I wanted to thank our bishops, of course, Bishop Enoch, and our visiting Liturgical Lazr of Niagra, and Barnabas, his guest, and everyone who contributed in the questions in the chat, and just thank you again, and again,
your blessing, Father.
Yeah.
God bless you.
God bless.
And have a good night, everyone.
All right.